This is a planning commission meeting for Wednesday, April 9th, 2025, and we're at quorum. Robert, if you could read the land acknowledgement, please.
Sure. We, the city of Lacey, are on the ancestral land of the tribal people of the Treaty of Medicine Creek, including the Nisqually Indian tribe and Squaxin Indian tribe, or island tribe. We acknowledge and remember those tribal people not recognized today who were absorbed or relocated into their tribes for other tribes for survival. We recognize the ancestors and their descendants who are still here. We recognize and respect the tribal people of the Treaty of Medicine Creek as the traditional stewards of this land since time immemorial, and their role today in taking care of these lands in perpetuity. We recognize and have the responsibility to call attention to the histories of disposition, forced removal, and abridged treaty rights that allowed our nation, state, and city to develop as they have today. We recommend that community members read the Medicine Creek Treaty of 1854.
Thank you. Move on to the approval of agenda and consent agenda items. Do I have a motion for the approval of tonight's agenda? So moved.
Second.
What's that?
Are we gonna do the minutes separately, or is the minutes included in this?
I think we do agenda and then the minutes.
Okay, gotcha. Yep, sorry. Apologies.
So approval of the agenda, I'm sorry.
I believe Gail
I did.
motioned and Spencer or I
Okay.
seconded.
All right, all in favor?
Aye.
Okay, then we move to approve for the minutes of March 12th, 2025.
I just have one correction.
Okay,
In the approval of the previous minutes, it said seconded by Robert Zeman. There is no Robert Zeman, so it's either Spencer Zeman or Robert Lane. Can't be both of us. I believe, I don't remember who actually did it, but we could probably watch the, okay.
Thanks.
You're welcome.
so with that correction, do I have a motion? So moved. Second. Okay, all in favor?
Aye.
Okay. So let's come to the portion for public comment.
Yeah, so let's maybe start with online public comment first. So we did have 2 people registered. Let me pull that information up. So do we have David Toyer? So David's coming on. David, go ahead and address the planning commission, and you've got about 3 minutes.
Yeah, thank you, Ryan. Thank you, members of the Planning Commission. David Toyer with Toyer Strategic Advisors. We're a land use and economic development consulting firm, and we represent the owners of 1302 Alder Street, which is one of the rezones that was submitted for consideration with the 2025 Comprehensive Plan Amendment. I submitted a letter on behalf of our client earlier today, pointing out that we believe that the scoring should be different for their particular proposal. It's a pretty simple map fix of kind of a longstanding issue where the site never should have been zoned open space institutional to begin with. And we think that that's something that can easily be handled as a part of the 2025 comprehensive plan update. And it makes sense, especially right now, given the fact that, you know, all cities are trying to find infill opportunities for housing, and the zoning we've requested would support potential housing. And then, you know, even more importantly, the property is like within 200 feet of a transit stop for intercity transit on an arterial corridor. It kind of checks all of the boxes for the things that communities are trying to do to create housing options in their community to meet the demands of our housing crisis. So we'd really ask that as you get into your discussion tonight on the results of applying the rubric that staff presented last month, that you take a closer look at the 1302 Alder proposal and the scoring associated with that, because we believe that there may be a bit overthinking of what this involves, as opposed to this is a fairly simple map change that should really be done. because this property has been, kind of locked in under this open space institutional zoning for quite some time. And if we're going to have the chance to do some infill development there and do a really nice project, this is the first step. And we've been at this for a while now. I know the client retained us first back in 2023. And that's when we started talking with staff about this. There wasn't a docket last year. We were asked to submit this year. They've been waiting for a long time, and we'd really like to see this really simple rezone picked up in the comp plan and done by the end of this year. So thank you for the opportunity to speak this evening.
Thank you, Mr. Toyer.
And I did earlier today email you all out the letter from David as well. So you'll have that, and we'll discuss in more detail the rezoning with the third agenda item tonight. The other person that has has registered is Victor, is this Versdes? So Victor.
Correct.
Okay,
Yeah.
while you're going on, you got 3 minutes, so go ahead.
Okay, so I am the owner of that said property. And yes, we hired professional services to get us through the rezoning, and David pretty much said everything I have to say. That's it.
Great. Thanks.
Thank you.
So that's all that we have registered on Zoom. We do have some folks in the audience. If anybody wants to give comment, then go ahead and you can use the sign-in sheet right over there. We'll grab that. Chris, did you sign in as well? Okay, so did you sign in? Okay. Go ahead.
Probably let Ed go first. He's part of the Boulder Street thing.
Okay. Yeah, if you want to, you can come up here.
Well, it's fresh in everybody's mind. It's gonna be the Boulder Street. You're welcome.
Introduce yourself and limit your comments to about 3 minutes.
Ed's Versdes and 1302 Alder. So that's a parcel that I actually purchased back in about '06. Sold it to my brother around '08. And been a minority owner in it. I've been trying to get the thing rezoned on and off, playing with it and everything else and having issues with it. I thought we hired Heather Burgess. 16 years later, you kind of get smart, start hiring attorneys and other people. And hired her about, I think it was 22, fall, late winter or so of 22. And she started having a few issues, and that's when we hired David the following year. And we kind of look at it, and I've always looked at it as kind of like I don't understand why it's an easy rezone. It's a great parcel to develop. A lot of the parcels in through Lacey Boulevard and everything jog in the same way and the whole works, and just we'd like to have that taken care of. And it seems like every time we come to the city, there's always something else that you run into. You know, it's kind of like one more thing, another year, another 2 years, one more thing. It's, like I said, 16, 17 years later, it's kind of getting a little old. But that's about it. And we are interested. I noticed on reading the however you guys did the graphics or whatever you want to call it, to figure out whether we qualify to be part of this year. We are interested in doing it. There was one of the questions in there that seemed like it was like we were like whatever, or didn't want to do it, and it's not the case. We're very interested in getting it done finally. So, and I think it'd be a great addition to the city and stuff, so. And that's it.
Thank you.
All right, thanks.
And then Chris Carlson is the other.
Thank you. Good evening, commissioners, and thanks for the opportunity to speak. My name is Chris Carlson. I'm the planning manager for Godat Pantier. We're an engineering, surveying, and land planning firm that's been in here in Thurston County for about 55 years. We've been secured by Matt and Thelma Jackson for their property that's being considered for this year's comprehensive plan amendment rezone process. The address of that is 6335 Pacific Avenue. It's just east of the Dakota Apartments, east of the intersection of Pacific Avenue and Carpenter Road. The property is currently zoned low density, which is 0 to 6 dwelling units to the acre. There is a daycare business that's a little bit farther east of the site between the Lacey Community Center and the Jackson property. So we think that this particular project and rezoning it, we're looking for the CBD 5 zone, which is what the Dakota Apartments next door is zoned as. And that would give you a higher density, which would also achieve one of the other major elements of the comprehensive plan that you're amending during the cycle, which is the housing element. As you all know, housing, we're a popular place here, and we're in need of additional housing. So we'd appreciate your support, and if you have any questions, be happy to answer them.
Thank you.
Thank you.
And that's it for public comment. Sorry. I'll help you out, Tanya. Well, Tanya's finding that. So the next section on the agenda is the commission member reports. So if you want to go around the table, maybe it'd be a great opportunity for Jennifer to introduce herself as a new member of the planning commission and start from there.
Sure. My name is Jennifer Mangione. This is the first time I've been at a meeting for the Planning Commission. I'm very grateful for the opportunity to be on an advisory board for the City Council. My background is that I was in the Air Force, and I've been a homeowner in Lacey since 2019. And since 2019 until last year, I was kind of living between here in Papua New Guinea and Norway for embassy work. But now my husband and I are here permanently in Lacey. Yeah, and I'm happy to help. Oh, one more thing. I'm in graduate school for community planning, which is in the urban studies program for UW Tacoma. So that's another useful thing that I have. Yeah, cool. Thanks.
I don't have any comment. I did listen and read the articles about the city council meeting about the tax, the park issues. Yeah.
Hi, Carrie and Michael, welcome. No real comment, just over spring break, I was able to travel and see some of these mixed use properties. My aunt had moved into a building that's, I believe, 7 stories, but a few years ago it was absolutely vacant below. And then we came back a few years later and business is booming. And there's this wonderful, vibrant community where we were, you know, it used to just be kind of an apartment building with empty storefronts in the bottom. But it's really nice to see how even locally, some of those empty spaces are being filled and community is starting to build around those places.
Thank you. Welcome to the planning team again, and I have no report.
Welcome. It's nice to meet you. And no report for me.
Elliot Kirk, and no report from me.
Robert Lane. Last month I attended an ALICE summit. So ALICE is asset limited, income constrained employed. There we go. And so it just took me a second. And it was just really interesting to just kind of hear this kind of group of individuals that kind of fall above the federal poverty line, but below being able to really thrive in our community, and just bringing people together to kind of talk about some solutions. I thought it was really unique and interesting and glad that we talked about it. Of course, like any of these kind of conversations, I think a lot of people left with more questions than answers, which is, you know, unfortunately a common theme for difficult problems, but I'm glad that I was able to just be part of that conversation. And yeah, just been kind of interesting watching the Lacey City Council and the vote for the tax as well.
And I'm Tanya Moore. I don't really have a commission members report except for because of my job, I've been doing a lot of legislation, watching every Friday. We have a meeting, so I've been watching a lot of the reports on a lot of the upcoming changes that are going to affect the planning commission too. So it's going to be really interesting.
Yeah, and we may have a legislative update, you know, at some point, especially after the session is complete, that we'll kind of hit the high points of what may be coming down the pike later on.
Okay, so department.
Sorry, could I cut back in? I totally blanked earlier. So Intercity Transit is gonna be having an open house on the 30th of April for the Martin Way Crossing Study. And I would highly recommend that anybody come participate. It's gonna be put on by TRPC, that's the Third Regional Planning Commission for council. And they're looking for feedback on their initial proposal on that. And so I think that the public should be aware of that if that's not being broadcasted.
What was the?
Where is it?
April 30th, it's at 5 PM at Intercity Transit's headquarters on Pattison.
Thank you. Okay, department report.
Nothing tonight?
We don't have a public hearing. So new business, reclaimed water plant.
Yeah, so I'll turn it over to, again, to get us started. Aaron, would you mind, or,
It's already up.
so we just gotta hit the share button on the Zoom. Oh, before we do that, sorry. Hit the share button on Zoom. And then go ahead and bring up your presentation. Hit the share button.
Right here.
And then you can start the presentation from there. No. Just perfect. All right, we got it.
Good evening, planning commissioners. My name is Gagan Brar. I'm one of the utility engineers with Public Works Water Resources Department. And today I'm joined here with by Matt Huang with Corolo Engineers, Terry O'Neill, Senior Utility Engineer, and Scott Egger, Public Works Director. And we are together, we are providing you a briefing on our city's reclaimed water plan. And no formal action is needed, but we would love your feedback. The next step for us is to attach this reclaimed water plan to the wastewater comprehensive plan update, which is going to be in the future. It's already in the works. And later on, we'll adopt the wastewater comprehensive plan along with the reclaimed water plan down the road. So now I'll have Matt provide you a brief overview of the plan.
Good evening, commissioners. Glad to be here today. I'm with Corolo Engineers. We're a engineering firm focused on water. And glad to present this reclaimed water plan that we've been working on for the last several years. So today I'd like to give you a little background on what reclaimed water is, the existing facilities that the city has, as well as reclaimed water use in the city. We'll talk about water rights mitigation requirements. And we'll talk about the foreseeable future, what we expect the city to be doing on reclaimed water, some recommendations, and then some longer term projections. So what is reclaimed water? So reclaimed water, you're all familiar with your toilets, and as we flush the toilets, the water goes to a wastewater treatment plant. And that the treatment process, there's kind of an initial wastewater treatment, which is a kind of a traditional primary where the solids are settled down, and then secondary, which is a biological treatment. But after that, there is some kind of advanced treatment before reuse, and in this case, there is a filtration, disinfection, chemical treatment, and reverse osmosis. LOT, which is the Lacey, Olympia, Tumwater, Thurston, they're the regional kind of wastewater utility in this area. They have the Martin Way reclaimed water plant, which is not too far from here. And it provides defined in the state of Washington as Class A reclaimed water, which is high quality water, which is treated to stringent standards for reuse. And there's a membrane bioreactor technology that's used at the Martin Way plant, which is biological treatment, microfiltration, and chlorine disinfection. And so this provides high quality water that is available for reuse, not for potable purposes, but for other purposes. And our next slide. So Class A reclaimed water is, we use it for replenishing groundwater supplies. It can be used for irrigation, flushing toilets. And some, and potentially some industrial uses, but it's not intended for domestic use, not intended for drinking, bathing, swimming, the like. So this map kind of shows the existing reclaimed water facilities. The Martin Way Reclaimed Water Plant is owned by lot, and there's allotments from this plant that the reclaimed water from this plant goes to the cities of Lacey, Olympia, and Tumwater. Lot also has a butt inlet plant, which is down kind of in the little Olympia area. There's the Hawks Prairie Reclaimed Water Ponds, which is kind of in the northeast part of the city. These are, we have a picture on a future slide, but there's infiltration of that. It's more a disposal mechanism, but lot infiltrates water at about 2 million gallons a day. And that's owned by lot as kind of a disposal mechanism. The city a number of years ago built this Woodland Creek groundwater recharge facility that infiltrates between 0.3 and 0.9 million gallons of water per day, depending on the season. That facility is jointly owned between the city of Lacey and city of Olympia and has been used for a number of years. This is a picture in Woodland Creek Park, the picture of the Woodland Creek groundwater recharge facility. The picture on the left was during construction. Terry was involved there. On the right is kind of what it looks like under today or under normal conditions. So it just looks like the grass field. This is an aerial photo of the Hawks Prairie Reclaimed Water Pond that's owned by lot. You know, there's some paths around there, but you know, it's a water feature. So beyond that, there are some reclaimed water pipelines within the city. So lot owns some pipelines. This I guess it's red, green. I'm colorblind, so I can't, I struggle with the colors, but there's a line that says active transmission main. That's a 14-inch diameter pipeline. It's about 3 miles long that conveys water from the Martin Way from the facility to the Hawks Prairie Ponds. There is also a pipeline on Mullen Road that was that lot constructed for a previously planned reclaimed water plant, but that plant was never built, and the city is at least considering buying that main from lot. Lacey also has a number of pipelines that are owned. There were around the Gateway development, there were reclaimed water piping that was constructed. Those pipelines are currently charged and filled with potable water, but they could be used in the future to supply reclaimed water customers. There is this in blue, there is this active transmission main, which conveys water from the Martin Way Reclaimed Water Plant to the Woodland Creek facility. It's a 12-inch diameter pipe, about 1.3 miles. And there is also an inactive transmission main, which is not currently used, that the city built in Marvin Road. That was constructed, I don't know, maybe 10 years ago when the city repaved the street. And so with the intention to serve locations like the sports park. But currently that pipeline is not in use. So in terms of current use, we have raw wastewater, and that is kind of split between 2 of lots of facilities. One is the Bud Inlet Treatment Plant in Olympia, the other is the Martin Way Reclaimed Water Plant. And the city of Lacey's allotment is 0.68 MGD. And so the majority of that water currently is sent to Woodland Creek, to the recharge facility for purposes of water rights mitigation, and we'll talk about that in the next slide. And then some of the amount, about 30,000 to 200,000 gallons per day is disposed at Hawkesbury Reclaimed Water Ponds. So currently, the city infiltrates reclaimed water to the underlying aquifer to comply with water rights mitigation requirements for potable water supply for groundwater pumping. Basically, the requirement that was set by the Department of Ecology is that for water rights for certain wells, when those wells were installed to pump from them, the city needed to put in this facility to replace that water. And so this water is used for mitigation requirements. And this is kind of a, projected increasing water rights mitigation requirements for the city over the next 15 years. Sorry. You can see through here that there has already been an increasing amount over the last, 8 years as the city grows and there's more people here, more water demand, and so that projection is expected to continue to increase. And so I would mention that wastewater flows are intended to increase as well over time, but because water demands will go up, the city will need to mitigate more.
Sorry, could you explain that metric with the MGY? Is that million gallons per year?
That's million gallons per year.
Okay, thank you.
So for the foreseeable future, we believe that the majority of the reclaimed water allotment will need to be used for Woodland Creek groundwater recharge to meet water right mitigation requirements. And because of that, after our study, we are not recommending any additional capital improvements to be able to use the water for other purposes such as landscape irrigation. And therefore, there's no financial plan or no financial impact to the city to need to build anything. Because there really are only minimal flows remaining after the environmental mitigation requirements. We would like to, the city would like to, and our recommendation is we would like to encourage LOT to expand the production capacity of the Martin Way reclaimed water plant, because that would provide additional water to the city. But for the foreseeable future, we really see that the reclaimed water will be used for water rights mitigation. We did look at potential irrigation customers, existing customers that are using potable water for irrigation, as well as future customers that might be developed over time based on vacant parcels, and potentially demand could be in the order of 1.4 to 2.5 million gallons a day of that, if that water were available, that could be used to serve customers that are currently, but otherwise would use potable water and serve them with reclaimed water. But that would also require storage and pumping and other significant infrastructure. So in the future, the projection in 2040 is that the city of Lacey will have an allotment of 1.46 million gallons a day, and that water rights mitigation requirements will be in the range of 0.9 to 1.3 million gallons a day, which means at some point down the road, 15 years, that there may be some available water for irrigation purposes, but that's down the road. And we don't believe that it makes sense for the city to invest additional funds in that reclaimed water program at this point in time. So the conclusion for this plan is that there is no capital improvement program to be incorporated into financial plan. We do want to encourage lot to expand production capacity of the Martin Way reclaimed water plant. And so if the city finds that there's excess reclaimed water supply available after water rights mitigation, then the city could consider expanding infrastructure to serve additional irrigation customers or some other potential reuse. And at that time, the city would update the 2025 reclaimed water plan. So with that, thank you, appreciate it, and Guggen, I don't know if you have any other comments, but other than that, we'll open it for questions.
Does anybody have questions? Spencer?
Thank you. Thank you for that presentation. For my information, is there any benefit to increasing the amount of groundwater that we're allowing to leach into there? Are we able to replenish the aquifers by pumping additional wastewater? Or is that something that I'm misconstruing?
Terry, can you?
So right now, we have a requirement for our water rights that we are put in a certain amount of reclaimed water. And so we meet that need. And the facility has a limited amount of capacity. And right now, it just matches that. So as far as adding addition onto that, it's not something we have considered further.
Elliot?
My water bill is $120 a month. So I can assume that other people with similar homes are also $120 a month. We've seen prices just simply go up every year on clay drought. Then we have record years of rainfall. We never see the bill come down. So what we're saying is we need more money to put more money into a water reclamation in the world's wettest state. So right now, I call bull on the drought personally, but that's just my personal opinion because I've looked at all the stats and I've seen these little demonstrations. It really sounds like a money grabber, just to put it rudely. So all we're doing we're not putting the money into like the concrete plant that uses 1.2 billion gallons of water a year. Or we're just simply throwing it right back on the water over the watershed part or over at the Fox Prairie for irrigation. So what is the purpose of the mitigation in the first place? If we have so much rain in this area, so much reclamation through natural effects.
I can respond to that. It's a good question. So your bill and the amount of rains are completely independent of each other. So we're running a business and our rates are set to cover the cost of that business. We don't run for profit, we just cover our costs. So what you're paying for in those rates are the costs of all the infrastructure, all the pipes in the ground, pumps in the ground, the reservoirs, the booster stations, the electricity to run the system, all the labor to operate and maintain the system, design and construction, to replace, aging and outdated infrastructure. I'm sure everyone here has heard the term, there's water everywhere and no water to drink. That's our situation. So in order to obtain water rights, we have to obtain those through the Department of Ecology. And all of our water here in Lacey and now also Olympia Tumwater is drawn from groundwater. We don't draw it from surface water and treat it. They do that in some locations. However, part of the requirement from the Department of Ecology is that in order to get water rights is you have to demonstrate that you are not impacting any surface waters or other users of the groundwater or water. And so a hydrogeologic model had to be put together for the region. And then you model the additional water that you would like water rights for, that you're going to withdraw from the ground in the model demonstrates whether there's impacts to the surface water bodies. And, you know, so you've got the Nisqually River, the Deschutes River, McAllister Creek, and all these others. So what we've learned over the years, all the fisheries folks, wildlife folks, and ecology, is that these basins are overdrawn. So in terms of during the low flows, the amount of water necessary to sustain the salmon and the fish and all that, that those water rights have been over allocated. And so so that's where a lot of these costs come in. And that's why this mitigation project that was described at Woodland Creek, why it's required. We had to define through the modeling the amount of impact to each of these basins, the Nisqually Basin, McAllister Creek, Deschutes, and others. And then we had to put together a plan to mitigate those impacts. And so those impacts included us partnering regionally with the city of Olympia and the city of Yelm to buy the Smith Farm, which had a mile of river frontage on the Deschutes River, and retire those water rights, and then go in and do out-of-kind mitigation, which is converting, this old farmland, pasture land, sheep land back into wetlands and how it was, before, in order to improve the quality of the water, either the temperature and all these things that impact, salmon and other fish. The mitigation projects for infiltrating this water into Woodland Creek, onto the park, the pictures you saw, is to increase the level of water flow in Woodland Creek. And, so there's also the seasonal impacts in terms of when the groundwaters are low and the water in the stream is low. These are all requirements that we had to fulfill just to get additional water rights. I was hired in 2007 as the Public Works Director. In the job description, the number one priority is getting more water rights. Because in 2006, there was a quasi moratorium placed where you could get, as a developer, if you're building, you could get water in the city of Lacey, but if you're developing in the UGA, the only water you could get for a development was for a single lot of record in a 5/8 inch meter. So basically that shut down development in the UGA unless the developer brought us water rights. So going through, doing all the work we had to do to define the impacts and then define how we were going to mitigate the impacts. I think it was 2012 or 13, we finally got the water rights that we needed. And Peter Brooks and Julie Rector, we were fortunate to have two very, very qualified people that worked. But we worked, it wasn't just City of Lacey. Like I say, we worked regionally. We had to work with the City of Olympia and on one regional case. And then also with the Squaxin Island tribe and then the Nisqually tribe and all these stakeholders. So what I'm telling you is that, we have to follow these rules, regulations, laws in order to get water rights. And if we don't do that, we don't get water rights. So if we hadn't done all this, we'd be out of water rights and there would be no growth whatsoever. There would be no new construction. And that's kind of the reality of it. But at the end of the day, our rates reflect the cost of doing business. Like I say, we don't do it for profit. And in terms of the amount of water that falls and the rain that falls, I mean, it's cyclical, but we draw water from shallow wells like down off the Capital City Golf Course, about 60 feet deep. our deeper wells are out in Hawks Prairie that are in the 600 to 700 foot. Rainfall has pretty much zero impact. I mean, Terry could speak more to our drawdowns out in Hawks Prairie. But even like the capital city, the aquifer that we're drawn from there, the rainfall, it helps, but it doesn't, just because it rains a lot, I guess it does make more water available to us to draw from the groundwater. And I hope, if I'm open to questions, so.
So what you described was this huge bureaucracy that you have to mitigate and oversee. And we're creating a bigger bureaucracy to handle the bureaucracy when we're not doing things like selling the water to industries, such as the water line literally goes right by Miles Sand and Gravel, which uses a huge amount of water, which they would be glad to buy the water from you at a much more reduced rate. But you don't want to lose the money from that, I'm sure, but we're not using the reclaimed water for industry, are we?
Well, we can't. There is no reclaimed water for industry because it's all committed to the water rights mitigation that's required.
Bureaucracy.
Well, it's the way that we were able to expand though, like, right, if we didn't have water rights, we couldn't expand, get more business, get more housing, right? Like we had to mitigate in order to get more water rights.
Right.
Right, so it's like chicken egg scenario where like we had to invest in order to grow, but then that's the cost of business is like we don't have reclaimed water to sell because that's how we ended up with more water rights was.
Right. So.
Well, and what you're saying is there's sufficient reclaimed water over that graph to satisfy the current need and some future need. Therefore, there's no need to expend money on a capital project to create more reclaimed water. Because I assume that would probably send your water bill higher.
Right.
Exactly.
I mean, that's not a cheap
We're tired of these projects that are feeding themselves for project's sake.
But their recommendation is no, their
Yeah, but
recommendation
maybe
is no
choose no
capital.
project.
That's their recommendation.
So
No, the recommendation is to expand the existing reclamation
What-
plant, is that correct?
No, it isn't.
No, it's
No,
not.
it isn't.
I guess what I'm telling
Let
you,
the man who's in charge tell us.
what I'm telling you is you're not gonna find a more efficiently and better run business than we run. And, unless someone changes the laws, these are the rules of engagement and we are, our part, you aren't gonna find a better, more efficiently run business. And also in terms of rates, our rates are very comparative. And if you look at rates around the state, they are very, very comparative. And,
But essentially what they're saying is there's no additional capital expense required at this point in time. Because we're not going to expend a huge amount of dollars to do reclaimed water so we can give it to industry or agricultural work, because those rates would be astronomical. We'd have to offset building the plant and what they're saying is there's no need to do that at this point. So there's no money attached to this at all.
I would comment that there's a lot of numbers that we did behind this, but one of the problems you'll find is to make even if there were water available, to make reclaimed water available to customers in terms of the infrastructure needs, it would cost more to build those projects than the amount of revenue you would get.
Yeah.
Right.
Yeah.
So I'll just say, I think this is a unique plan in that it doesn't necessarily have too much of a plan to it.
Right, that's right, that's right. The plan is to.
Plan is to let it do it thing.
So keep that in mind that, it's good to have kind of, this documented where we haven't before. So there's really been kind of these early ideas that, well, maybe we could use some of it for irrigation or those kinds of uses, but then it is, you know, it calls
What's
into
the cost
question
of
the financial feasibility of the situation. So then it brought into, well, now we can use it for water rights purposes because we, in order to get, you know, more, be able to serve development in an urbanizing area, which we should be doing, then we need to be able to offset the impacts of that. So, so really what we're saying is, you know, in the future, that is the most beneficial use of this water. It's recognizing that. And then as Guggen said, this will be wrapped into the wastewater comp plan, kind of it basically as an appendix that says, okay, for those that are interested in figuring out what the future of reclaimed water use in Lacey will be, it'll be this. And so, you know, I think that, you know, it serves the purpose that we need it to serve in terms of the water rights mitigation. And that's about all at this time. Not to say that maybe someday down the future, we wouldn't amend the plan to be able to, you know, use it if for some reason we needed to, you know, transition people off of domestic water for certain purposes, right? But at that point, this point in the city's evolution, we're just not there yet, right? So.
And that's a huge infrastructure investment too. Right? Yeah.
Correct. And so, you know, and that's where you would have a capital plan, capital facilities plan that would go along with a plan like this that would say, okay, this is how much it's going to cost to put, you know, tanks and more pipes in the ground and all that kind of stuff, which really doesn't exist at this point, except for in limited circumstances. So, yeah.
Thank you.
Thank you. Thank you.
Thank you very much.
Any of you ever have any questions on water rights? Yes. Bring cards in and circulate them around. It's a complicated item. It can be a frustrating item. It's an expensive item. But anyway, yeah, I'd be more than happy to talk to you
Remember
about
that water rights battle a long
Yeah.
time ago. That was
Yeah, it was a hostile
pretty
takeover
freaky at the
of,
time.
yeah.
property.
Anyway, no, I mean, yeah, I mean, like I say, those are the rules of engagement that we needed to follow in order to secure water rights that allow development to continue, so.
Sorry for burning your ears. It's
Oh,
a
no
sensitive
problem.
subject for me. One, my water bill continually going up, and two, the hostile takeover of private property,
Yeah.
family property that's been in generations.
So I heard you say you used to live in San Francisco.
Yes.
So in the 1980s, I was an engineer diver and we put in a 12-foot diameter ocean outfall, went 5 miles offshore, took off around the zoo.
Disastrous.
It, anyway, it was, yeah, but that was at the time, all the wastewater for the city of San Francisco went in,
Out to sea.
well, no, it went into the bay.
Yeah.
So Clean Water Act funds paid for
Meaning
a tertiary treatment plant that went near the old Fly Shacker Zoo. We had the offshore portion doing the pipeline, but yeah, wastewater to water, so fascinating stuff. Well, there's some blue.
Okay.
I'll bring some cards back.
So now we're on to old business, the comprehensive plan climate element with Lindsay Field.
Yep, so I'll set the stage here a little bit while Lindsay's getting ready. And Lindsay, would it be easier if we did the presentation and shared screen here and then just said next slide, or do you want to share that on
Yeah,
there?
I think that would be easier if that works.
Okay, yeah, we can do that. So while I'm setting it up, Aaron will share the screen and just let us know, and we'll just go to the next slide.
Okay, great. Can you all hear me okay?
Yeah.
Yes.
Perfect. I'm in Kentucky right now with some family, so I'm currently in my mom's basement. I'm just making sure there's not weird noises in the background. Good to see you all again, though. I'm Lindsay Fields, the Climate and Sustainability Coordinator with the City of Lacey. I also have our consultants from Ramey Associates, Robin Wong and Ron Whitmore. They've been working on the climate resiliency sub-element of the climate element. And we are here to talk about the draft goals and policies in the policy framework for the climate element of the comprehensive plan.
Yep, and so as Lindsay mentioned, so this is kind of setting kind of the first in a series of the different elements of the comprehensive plan draft that will be brought to you in kind of subsequent planning commission meeting. So the first one that's completed is the climate element. So it's made up of, you'll hear a briefing tonight on the two different parts of that, which is the greenhouse gas reduction sub-element, and then also the climate resiliency sub-element. And then in 2 weeks, you'll have a briefing on land use and housing. And then after that, so in about a month, economic development, transportation, the environment and utilities. So you're gonna have these kind of series of briefings along the way. At the same time too, we're also briefing the council. So this same presentation will be in front of the council next Tuesday at their meeting as well. So we'll take all the feedback that we get from you all, the feedback we're getting from the council, and make that available in a public draft of the comp plan, which will be released sometime late June or early July. So yeah. So with that, let's go ahead and get started. So Erin, if you want to start the presentation. All right, do you want me to just drive?
If you want to.
Okay,
Excellent.
go ahead.
Awesome. Yeah, I'll go ahead and start with the first few slides and then hand it off to Robin and Ron to talk about the climate resiliency goals and policies. Just to provide a little bit of a background. So comprehensive plans are what we've been talking about for the last few months, are the centerpiece of local planning efforts. We are required under the Growth Management Act to update these plans every 10 or 15 or 20 years. We do it every 10 years. And so some of typically they're 20-year plans. I think we've been updating every 10 years. So last year, the last time we updated was 2016. These visions for the community, these comprehensive plans, they consist of goals, objectives, policies, and actions that really are going to guide the day-to-day decisions of elected officials and local government staff for the next few years. And so Lacey's goals for the 2025 update, just to remind you, are to be readable and usable. So we're using a web-based platform this year. Reflects the vision, not just the vision that we talk about as a staff team, but also the vision of the community and what we've heard through outreach, through talking with folks about the comprehensive plan, integrates and is relatable between elements. So what we're really focusing on this year as well with the web-based version is this cross between, we're not just separate elements, how one policy and goal can affect another element, or how they might be cross-examining, right? They might be cross-connecting pieces. For instance, housing and climate, how do those talk to each other? Streamlined, so we're making it more readable and trying to get the process down and streamlined a little bit more. And then also meets the GMA requirements and new laws. So there's a lot of new laws around comprehensive planning. One of them, HB 1181, is talking about how we need to create a new climate element. If you'd like to go to the next slide, Erin or Ryan. Yep, so how we get to these policies and goals, they're not just something that we sort of pull together. We are required, and we do a lot of technical analysis and community outreach to get there. So goals and policies are created through various avenues, including conducting audits on current plans, for instance, the hazard mitigation plan that we did with the resiliency sub-element, the thirst and climate mitigation plan that we did with the greenhouse gas sub-element. How we're going to implement new mandates and requirements, utilizing resources through the Department of Commerce. Commerce has a lot of resources for us to use, and to start kind of a starting ground for goals and policies. And then researching other cities' plans. How are they tackling this new climate element? If they're similar to us and similar to our planning, is it something that we want to look at doing as well? And aligning goals and policies with the community vision. So then bringing it all back to, what does our community want? And do these plans and goals align also with our community vision, and not just ensuring mandates are met? Goals are overarching objectives, so they might be very high level, and they're meant to be, which leaves us a lot of room in the future to interpret these goals and policies, to make them work for us, to reach these goals and policies. And also, comprehensive plans just tend to be this large document that kind of oversees everything. So it doesn't get into the weeds too much on individual policies, but really sets the framework for our growth. Next slide, please. And so the climate element is a new requirement. I'm sure you've heard me say that before. For this cycle of comprehensive planning for jurisdictions who fall into Growth Management Act, which we do. We plan under GMA. Per HB 1181, which is that climate planning legislation, cities and counties under the Growth Management Act must have a climate element as a part of their comprehensive plan. And part of that is the requirement that this climate element has both a greenhouse gas sub-element, which is that mitigation strategies and how we're going to reduce greenhouse gas emissions, then the resiliency sub-element, and how we're going to adapt to climate change essentially and plan resilient under that. Next slide. Again, so we've taken community engagement with technical analysis. We conducted a vulnerability and risk assessment for climate hazards to help us draft goals and policies for the resilience sub-element. We participated through the Thurston Climate Mitigation Collaborative to conduct a greenhouse gas inventory in 2022, which we're using as a baseline year for the city. We've done policy audits of current plans, and we've also reviewed Commerce's guidance at multiple steps to ensure that we're meeting every requirement that we need to. And some of the community engagement that we've heard, sustainability and the environment was actually a really top factor for almost everyone we talked to throughout this process. It was, I think, 4 or 5 on the top 7 things that we heard back from the community. So a lot of comments, a few of them there. 20-minute towns with dense housing to make it easier for walking and bicycling to get most things we need without a car was one of the comments. I want Lacey to be the cutest and most walkable, cyclable, and accessible tree city in Washington. My dream version of Lacey has separated bike lanes and sidewalks along all roads and streets, and a vibrant city center with small local businesses thriving, with pedestrians walking, cafes, local shops, restaurants. So really that language around how our community sees Lacey and sees Lacey in the future. Next slide, please. And with that, I'm going to hand it off to Robin and Ron, who are going to talk about the resiliency sub-element policy framework.
Thank you very much, Lindsay. This is Ron. Is the audio okay on your end?
Yes.
Yep.
Okay, excellent. Well, it's good to see everybody again. Again, I'm a principal with Ramey Associates and the principal in charge for the work we're doing in support of the city's comprehensive plan update. It's been a while since our updates in December and February, so just as a reminder, the purpose of the resilience sub-element is to avoid or reduce the adverse impacts of climate change, as Lindsay noted. And specific to the resilience sub-element, our foundational work has included an audit of existing related plans and policies, as well as a vulnerability and risk assessment, and also input from community members through both resilience-focused listening sessions and some questions in the comp plan survey last fall specific to climate change, adaptation, and resilience. All of the work that has been done has informed the policy framework, which you have a copy of in your agenda packet, which is our initial attempt at identifying proposed resilience draft goals and policies. This is all explained in the first section of that framework called Policy Foundations. And your feedback on the framework will inform revisions in the goals and policies, and those will make before releasing the draft for public review, as Ryan mentioned, sometime this summer. Next slide, please. Oops, sorry, can you go back a slide? Thank you. For the purposes of clarity and transparency, the policy framework itself, in this form, it won't be this way in the actual sub-element, but it's presented as a table starting on page 8 of the framework. So in addition to draft goal and policy text, the table includes other useful reference information, including the source, that is, like, why did we come up with this idea of a particular goal or policy? And so you'll see references to the plan and policy audit, the hazards assessment, or different community engagement events. It also identifies co-benefits. Department of Commerce specifically called out the utility of recognizing how advancing resilience can often have benefits consistent with other community goals. And so there's a column identifying those. Likewise, Commerce recommends suggest strongly really that each of 11 sectors be covered in a resilience sub-element. So we've tried to be transparent about sectors that relate to each goal and policy. And then finally, as Lindsay pointed out, there is a lot of interrelationship among comp plan elements, and that's particularly true for resilience. And so the final column in the table in the framework identifies which elements are connected in some way with a particular goal or policy. Next slide, please. We had draft goals, initial draft of this framework done, and so we had draft goals ready in advance of the open house back in February. So it was a great opportunity for us to get some initial community feedback on that. And as you all know, there was great attendance and a lot of people spent some time at the climate station. And so I think we heard 39 different comments, probably, I would guess, from 25 different people, commenting on a number of what at the time was 14 different goal areas. And it was extremely helpful feedback. And so you'll see references in the policy framework table to the open house, and that's where we made refinements to or additions based on input we got from the community at that open house. So what you have in your packet tonight, sorry, next slide, please, is a second draft of our framework, which really adds two additional things that we hadn't initially incorporated. One, as I mentioned, was the input from the open house. We also integrated insights from looking at model goals that have been assembled by the Department of Commerce through their Climate Policy Explorer. So you'll see references to that in the table as well. And then because state requires that each goal have at least one policy, as we were rethinking some of the goals and policies, we ended up doing some consolidation. And so now there's 12 goal areas with associated policies as opposed to the original 14. I'm now going to pass things over to Robin, who will provide you a brief overview of the policy framework and some of the policies.
Thanks, Ron. Good evening, commissioners. Again, I'm Robin Wong, and I'm the Climate Action and Resilience Planner at Ramey Associates. I'm going to give a quick overview of what we have in the second draft of our resilience policy framework. So as Ron mentioned, we have that full framework document with the goals and policies in your packet. This iteration of the policy framework has 12 goals, and you'll see that each has a handful of policies underneath it. We're not going to go through all of them right now, but I'll just give you a quick overview of the types of goals and policies that we have. So the initial two goals focus on making sure that people understand climate hazards and risk, know what they can do to prepare, and help build their adaptive capacity. The next two, goals 3 and 4, are about making sure that the city is prepared to take action on climate adaptation and resilience. So the city needs to have the best available data and have other resources, to take action through, policies, programs, what have you. The remaining goals focus on making development, natural and built infrastructure, and city facilities resilient to climate change impacts. Next, I'll walk through some of the goals that we think are most important to discuss with you today. And then after we go through those, we do have a set of questions to go through with you all. Next slide. Okay, so the first one that we'd like to talk about quickly is Goal 5, Resilient Land Use. And this has to do with developing in a way that does not put people, infrastructure, and other development in harm's way from climate change. And as we found in the climate vulnerability and risk assessment, Lacey is not highly exposed to hazards compared to some other places in the state and the country, to hazards with a defined footprint, geospatial footprint like flooding, sea level rise, or wildfire. However, we do have to keep in mind that the state is making new wildfire maps, which will continue to be important for future land use. As Ron and Lindsay mentioned, there's ties for a lot of these goals with other elements, and this one closely has to do with the land use element, as well as the housing and the parks, culture, and recreation element. Next slide. Yeah, there we go. Okay. Goal 7 is a thriving urban forest, and we heard at the open house that trees are really a priority for Lacey residents. So we did add more policies to this goal, particularly around tree preservation and code changes that support, tree preservation as well as deal with sort of the trade-offs that trees can cause. And the main policy for this goal is to implement the Urban Forest Management Plan, which was adopted pretty recently in 2021. And this goal ties into the climate change sub-element because trees reduce greenhouse gases through carbon sequestration, but it does also have tie-ins to the transportation element and the parks, culture, and recreation elements. Next slide. Okay, goal 8 is resilient design standards, and this one has to do with adopting standards for buildings to reduce the impacts of hazards, including wildfire, flooding, heat, and others. We added those last 2 policies that I have on the slide about financing and insurance based on public comments from the open house. And this helps to address the fact that changing the way we build for climate adaptation can be really expensive and particularly burdensome for low-income residents as well. And since this goal focuses on development, it's really closely tied to the land use element as well as the housing element. It also cross-pollinates with the climate sub-element, as the city can also make changes to development standards to reduce greenhouse gas emissions from buildings through energy, water, waste, what have you. Next slide. And the last one we'll go through quickly is goal 12, which is about establishing places where people can go to stay safe and access resources during climate hazard events. And the policies in this goal recognize that the city has a role to activate public facilities, as well as the reality that people often just prefer to go somewhere that they're familiar with, like a mall, if it's like really hot outside, for example. Participants at the open house express their support for this goal because it increases equitable adaptation. So folks who are older, have medical conditions or medical devices, as well as unhoused residents are more likely to experience adverse health impacts from exposure to heat, cold, and wildfire smoke. So that's the quick hits of some of our most interesting goals and policies. And so I'll hand it back to Ron for the discussion questions.
Thank you, Robin. And naturally, we're happy to answer any questions you have. As we noted earlier, this is a great opportunity to confirm that we're on the right track. And so when we get to the discussion portion for this agenda item, these are the sorts of questions we're really interested in your responses to, having to do with what's the highest priority or what set of these are the highest priority, whether you think we've missed something, overlooking something is a big no-no. So let's make sure we're covering all the bases. And then if any of the goals or policies raise any concerns for you, certain language maybe could be improved in some cases, anything that's unclear that needs to be clarified, strengthened, or softened, that sort of thing. All that sort of feedback is really helpful for us at this stage so that we can really refine these goals and policies in preparation for public review. Thank you very much.
Okay, so why don't we just kind of go around? You want to start, Robert?
Okay, I'm supposed to answer all these questions right now on the spot. Perfect. I mean, I think the biggest thing is I appreciate the way that the goals are written in the sense that one of my concerns is, right, there's a national shift in funding, or, I read something about FEMA, right? There's talks about FEMA funding differently or operating differently. So I would just appreciate really combing through the document and making sure that whenever we do talk to around funding sources, that they're flexible. And what I saw was that it seems like it's there and written in a way that can be adaptable, because nothing is guaranteed when it comes to funding sources, as we know and are watching in our current state budget. I didn't see anything missing on a cursory glance, but I am the first one to go through this in a very public setting, so. If something comes up as it goes around, I'll be sure to pipe up, don't worry. And concerns, I really just think, there's a lot of dependency on improvements in technology. I know last time we came around, one of the goals that is given to us by the legislature, right, is like zero emission by 2050. Which like I think my brain keeps thinking about today. And so I do think that public outreach kind of effort, so those goals 1s and 2s, really talking about like how that is obtainable or how you believe that to be obtainable without being a large financial burden on individuals, because I think we often goes back to like what I was talking about earlier with the whole like Alice group of individuals that are above the poverty line, but buying a $13,000 heat pump for their house doesn't sound like something that they can do, right? As someone who did that when my furnace finally went out and I wanted air conditioning because summers are smoky and hot now, that was a financial something that might not be obtainable for everyone, and maybe the median average income for a Lacey resident. So I think just really focusing on that educational piece of like 2050 zero emissions sounds like, when I look at it, I see a lot of dollar signs and that kind of makes me a little panicky. So just talking through, there are going to be advancements, or we believe, and this is a goal, and obviously if we don't meet that goal, what are the implications? And I think that's it. Is that enough for you, Tanya?
Elliot.
It goes like, oh, Elliot. I look at it from a construction point of view. When we changed the energy standards, it added 25% to the cost of a home. With the new R factors, you've got to have heels on your trusses, and which changed, of course, the building standards on that. We're looking at as you mentioned, the heat pump. When there's an event on your home, you sell it or you buy it, or you have a major remodel, you have to convert over from the gas, which not too long ago they were selling gas. Now they're saying gas evil, bad, bad, bad. People don't have $30,000 in this day and age. It all comes down to the 9 scariest words. We're from the government. We're here to help. So we're creating all these standards that are just adding to the cost of homes, which we talk a lot about affordable homes, but we do our actions the opposite of having affordable homes by creating all these huge standards that have minimal impact, from the R38 to the R44, minimal effect on the energy savings, et cetera. Having 5 different split airs versus eliminating the central air, you're trading energy. Why change things that work? People just want to be in a home. They want to be left alone. So I'm an anti-bureaucrat, as you can tell. So I'll pass that on.
Okay, as far as the most important, that first bullet point up there, I'm in the camp that I think you said you heard a lot from your community outreach of protecting the trees and protecting things. And I'm going to try not to think about how I wish this was a conversation 5 or more years ago, before Meridian campus was completely leveled with so many, old growth and forests that were knocked down for things that are there now. But I hope we can be more mindful of what happens next and not let any more of these beautiful trees being plowed down for development in that way, at that scale. So I'd like to see, the emphasis there, and I think that's important. If I skip over to the concerns, one of the things that was in the table, and I saw highlighted, actually, Robin chose to highlight tonight, is this fire-wise standards, and the statement there about imposing standards that would actually supersede regulatory language for HOA communities. That concerns me. A lot of people go into HOA communities for the reason of the structure, the the standards that are there and maintaining the values. And we always understood in HOA, COA communities that you're relieving a burden from the cities by having independent regulatory structure in those communities, a cost and a management of the things within the community. So I'd like to hear a little bit more about what is behind that. What are the thoughts about standards that would supersede HOA governing documents?
Spencer?
Yeah, so maybe I'm missing something here, but there's no real specific action steps. There's no way that, I mean, this is. You took a goal and then you put some generic action steps on it that don't have any real, like, so what's gonna happen when we say, just as a random example here, policy 2.A, recruit environmental stewards, right? Recruit and support volunteers, monitor, enhance ecosystem health, including shoreline areas, riparian zones, and forests. Who is doing this? Where is the money coming from? And how are we going to accomplish this? There's a lot of beautiful language on here, but what I don't see is realistic steps that we can take as a community with the staff and resources we have to achieve these goals. So I'm not sure if I'm misreading this or if I'm reading it too harshly because this is a later step in the process and I'm jumping the gun on that. But I'm not really understanding how we go from comprehensive plan update at the moment here and then take these very generic statements and then achieve actionable steps that will make measurable outcomes in 20 years.
Sure, yeah. I had to giggle because that was gonna be one of my most important goals. As a teacher, my students participate in the Student Green Congress. We go out on field trips where we plant trees and we restore riparian zones and we do all these different things. And at the Green Congress, what the kids said was that their most important goal was that we protect the environment for their generation and their children's generation. They want a planet to be left for them, and they've said that extensively.
100%.
And so, but I kind of giggled because now I have the 2.8, yeah. But I think that as we're thinking forward to our children, that's really the most important thing that we have here, that they do have those beautiful forests and that they have a balanced ecology, that we're restoring those salmon runs and you know, healing our environment. And some of them have even said to me, your generation destroyed our planet, stop doing it. And they don't have that voice. I think that's something that's missing from here. I see the carbon sequestration with the trees and preventing the cutting down of forests. And I think that's really important, but I also know that I believe methane gas is a really important greenhouse gas as well. I believe it's nitrous oxide, if I'm accurate, is one of those other gases that really is, you know, something. So I don't know if there's anything that we can do. I believe with methane, you know, you're looking at, you know, like landfills or cattle farms or, you know, pig farms, I don't know, whatever. But if there's something that could be looked at that we're not releasing those, but maybe finding a way to capture those gases to use them as fuels instead of releasing them to our environment, if there's any kind of goal like that for where we can use those farmlands to really maybe replace those natural gases that people want to use. I do have concerns about some of the goals and policies. I believe I read through there, increasing the use of electric bikes as a way to reduce emissions. But I do see a lot of very young children driving very fast on electric bikes, and I think that has to go hand in hand with safety, making sure that people maybe have some kind of a license and training on how to drive safely in those vehicles, that as well as making sure that they wear protective gear. And you know, as I'm driving through past some of the new developments, I'm seeing these in like 4,000 square foot homes. And of course, it's gonna cost more to insulate and heat. And I am one of the people who paid a ridiculous amount for a heat pump, but I don't have to put my AC unit in the window anymore, and I don't have to pay for my what do you call this? The gas, the gas truck used to come in and fill up my
Propane.
No, not propane. What's the other? It's like diesel fuel.
Like heating
Oh,
oil.
yeah, heating oil.
Heating oil, yeah, thank
Okay.
you. I have a
Wow.
fifties house. But so I finally was like, gosh, these prices are raising and the offset, like, I pay an extra $20 for electricity a month. But I used to pay like $150 a month to all year round to pay for the heating oil that I needed for the winters. So it was really hard to make that, and there was no benefit for people on heating oil. If you convert from natural gas to electric, you get a benefit, but there's nothing really for those people with older homes that are still using the heating oil. But yeah, so I think this is amazing and I appreciate the work you're doing. Thank you.
Yeah.
Well, I have to agree with Spencer and to some extent with Elliot. He's probably gonna fall out of his chair. But I do agree that, the construction constraints and the issue of affordable housing are diametrically opposed to one another at the present time. It is very hard to build affordable housing. The other thing I have to say is that the language in here and the goals and the projected policies are admirable in most iterations. The question is, how do we do all this without a staff of 25 people to implement and recognize and work together with all of these other organizations? And it seems to me to be well thought out in the sense that it covers all the bases, but I'm really concerned that we're gonna look at this after 10 years and say we did 3 out of 27 things.
Jennifer?
Yeah, so firstly, I want to say I appreciated the themes of this plan. And I understand that Lindsay said that it's intentionally zoomed out and at the strategic level. So these are obviously things that you're going to be working on over time. I am curious also how you are planning to recruit and support the volunteers. I thought that was a really interesting idea, and I like it. I think that giving community members roles and responsibilities and something that they hold themselves accountable to is a really good idea. It's a really good way for people to get involved in their community, to care about it. And then yes, also appreciated the walkability, connectivity themes, the 3 comments that you guys highlighted from community members. Love the idea, hope, like you said, Gail, that it actually happens. Would like to hear maybe some examples of how we see Lacey being more walkable and more connected. Oh, and then the one question or concern that I had was, while I also agree that having a tree city is valuable and I support that and I like it a lot personally, I do have a question. Why do we need more policies? I understand that you recognize that people overwhelmingly support the idea of having trees and maintaining them and all of that. But is there a threat? It sounded like you're talking about, Judith, about Meridian campus and that kind of thing. So that kind of answered my question a little bit there, that there might be some concerns about that kind of development happening. But it's, as far as I understand, the parcels of land in Lacey that are being developed now are not as full of trees at this point. Like you said, you kind of wish that was 5 years ago kind of thing. So are more policies necessary, or are we overloading ourselves with policies unnecessarily? Oh, right, and then the subsidizing electric bikes, I read that on the report as well. That seemed to me the only perhaps overstep and unnecessary use of money. For me, I don't see why traditional bikes wouldn't be useful for our size of city. Yeah, but thank you very much.
I agree with Spencer's comments. I was kind of like, okay, who's going to do all this and where's the money coming from and how is all this gonna happen and where's the plan on how to implement this? I also agree with the electric bikes. I think just regular bikes will work. I also, on the policy 8C, to promote sustainable design is to promote and emphasize sustainable building design and landscaping that protect against hazards. I like the idea of that, but I just don't know if in Lacey it could really truly be done. Just thinking about what kind of a building it would be and if it would fall within the landscape of our city. When I think of these kinds of buildings, I think of more along the lines of like Seattle, big cities that have these really beautiful, unique buildings. And I just don't see that in Lacey. I mean, I don't know, but I don't know. But that's kind of what my thoughts were. Did anybody have anything else?
Just policy 9C talks about reclaimed water and it first starts talking about using as alternative for potable water, and we just got done saying there isn't very much for that. So maybe just adjusting that to really like we are recharging our aquifers to make sure that we can maintain water rights. I mean, it's a lofty goals are great, but like the reality is we just said we're not gonna invest in that.
Good. Yeah. So maybe at this point, we can go to the greenhouse gas reduction sub-element.
Yeah, I almost wanted to stop you guys. You're having a great discussion, but a lot of that was about the greenhouse gas sub-element, which we'll get into. This was the resiliency portion, and well, there'll be time to have more discussion and conversation. And so greenhouse gas sub-element. So if the climate element altogether has two sub-elements, which is the resilience sub-element, which Robin and Ron just talked about, which is really talking about being resilient to climate hazards. The greenhouse gas reduction element talks about how we're going to meet or plan to meet state mandates. This is, you're talking about lofty goals, but a lot of these are mandates by the state that we have to be net, and it's not zero emissions, it's net zero by 2050, which really means that we have to be offsetting the emissions for everything that we're emitting, basically. Like we're reducing them, but we're also taking measures to sequester carbon, for instance. And so some of the requirements and guidance from Commerce and things that we're required to do, which is we have to reduce greenhouse gas emissions. We have to be net zero by 2050, and then we sort of walk back the goals. I think the goal is like be below 45% of 2022 levels by 2035, which we already pushed out from 2030, recognizing that 2030 is really only 5 years away, and then 75% by 2040, reaching net zero by 2050. Reduce vehicle miles traveled. So some of these things you're seeing about EVs and bicycles and transportation have to do with, one of the big requirements is that we have to reduce the vehicle miles traveled within our city and reduce those vehicle miles traveled that our residents are taking, either through adding bike lanes, better transportation projects, or putting housing near transportation, things like that. And then there's that co-benefits piece again, which I just talked about. So, putting affordable housing on transit lines, increasing those transit lines so that they run more often and on time, things like that, or working with intercity transit to plan those routes or to help however we can. And there's 13 sort of co-benefit options that we're looking at or trying to plan for as well. Next slide, please. So the policy framework goal. So the first goal is to implement the Thurston Climate Mitigation Plan. And this really recognizes that we've already been doing this work for the past 4 years. We've really only been implementing the plan for the past 2 years, I would say. But again, we want it to be in there so that, implement the Thurston County Mitigation Plan is a really large goal, right? It's broad. How do we implement it? But the TCMP actually has 72 strategies and actions in it that we can be taking or have taken already. So again, that larger piece looking down, like this implement the plan is large language, but there's 72 actions and strategies within that plan that we can take. Reduce greenhouse gas emissions by incentivizing the use of renewable energy, conservation and efficiency technologies, and practices in buildings. Again, this is talking to some of the work that's been done by the state as well about clean buildings and the Clean Buildings Act, and then also just, building code as well. Develop guidelines for the adaptive reuse of buildings. So the buildings that we have in the city, how can we adapt them for affordable housing, for community centers, things like that. But really getting to the point that we should be retrofitting some buildings versus, developing out. Next slide, please. Increase tree canopy cover to boost carbon sequestration while increasing solar access where practicable. You'll see that there's some policies in there about supporting state legacy forest land, because really for Lacey, supporting Thurston County and getting state legacy land is going to go leaps and bounds in helping us sequester carbon and reach our goals. Reduce vehicle miles traveled is goal 5. Goal 6 is support increased urban density and housing diversity. Goal 7, the City of Lacey as an organization will strive to reduce greenhouse gas emissions to 45% below 2022 levels by 2035, reduce to 75% below 2022 levels by 2040, and achieve net zero by 2050. Next slide, please. So implement the Thurston climate mitigation plan. So one of the things that you've been talking about, funding, things like that, although federal dollars are kind of waning and we're not sure where there's going to go, the Climate Commitment Act was put to the voters last year and they decided to keep it. So at least for the foreseeable future, we will be getting climate commitment dollars somehow in some way, either through grant processes. We've already gotten here funding, which is funded through the CCA for our Energize Thurston campaign. We've got it for climate planning, the work that we're doing on this comp plan itself. And then the state as well is using CCA funding to subsidize EV purchases. So there's definitely state funding out there. And then partner with and support the Thurston Climate Mitigation Collaborative's work. So what does this mean? It just means the work that we're already doing, that we'll continue to at least have a staff person that is in some way, some capacity supporting the TCMC in implementing the Thurston Climate Mitigation Plan. Next slide, please. Oh, that's okay. Reduce vehicle miles traveled. Policy 5C, implement multimodal transportation planning to reduce single occupancy vehicle dependence and greenhouse gas emissions. So connecting this goal to our transportation element, right? Because we want these elements to be cross-connected in many ways. And then HB 1181 also talks heavily about transportation. Transportation is also our second largest greenhouse gas emissions in Thurston County. So really thinking not just about car-centric planning, but multimodal transportation and how we plan our roads over the next 10 to 15 years to meet those. Because if you'll remember, it took 25 years to build out these roads that are very car-centric. So overnight, we're definitely not going to be able to put in bike lanes everywhere, but we have the time and actually a lot of the funding now through the state to sort of start that, so that in 10 to 15 years, we can be a way more connected community. Policy 5D, implement a safe, well-connected, and attractive bicycle and pedestrian transportation network through prioritizing projects in the Lacey Pedestrian and Bicycle Plan. So again, speaking more broadly, but there are prioritized projects in the Lacey Pedestrian Bicycle Plan. So cross-connecting that plan with the comprehensive plan also gives us more leverage as we plan. And as we're doing transportation projects to point out, hey, this is in our comp plan and it's in this plan. So maybe we should prioritize this project as well while we're doing other things. Next slide, please. Goal 7, greenhouse gas emissions reduction. So that's that large goal to be net zero by 2050. One of the large things we'll need to do is retrofit city-owned buildings for energy efficiency and conduct energy audits on city facilities. So we have at least one building that I think that is in a tier 2 building for Clean Buildings Act, and that deadline's coming up in 2028 to have an energy audit done and then start some of those measures for energy efficiency. So we'll need to start doing that work in the next couple of years. We'll also need to, at some point, I think we did a solar feasibility study on the senior center, but more of those action things will need to come up in the next few years as well. So having this goal kind of in here about retrofitting really helps us to start that planning process in the next 2 years. And after a feasibility study, then we can really talk about the money it's going to cost and if it's feasible or not to put solar, what we'll need to do to put solar on buildings, or just other energy efficiency measures as well. And then transition public fleets to zero emission vehicles and develop supporting infrastructure and programs. We're already doing this. As cars come offline, if there's a EV option that's available, affordable, and is proven, then we are purchasing EVs. We've also put in new staff, or we're working to put in new staff EV charging, so that folks who want to buy an EV and come here to work and charge their vehicle there can. We've also put in new fast chargers, and we put in quite a few new chargers at the shop in order to meet that sort of electric demand that we'll need if we're purchasing zero emission EVs for our fleet. And then the next slide. And then it's sort of the same discussion question, so we can keep having discussion. Or if you have anything else that came up while I was talking, I would be happy to connect with you all, also taking notes on what you're saying. And just so you know, the next steps, that the council is going to receive this exact same presentation with some of the feedback that you provided in that presentation. And after the council has sort of talked it through, given us feedback, talked about the direction, then we'll finalize the climate draft goals and policies, and then roll that into the larger comp plan, which will go out to the community. I think Ryan mentioned maybe hopefully by mid-July, to start sort of going around our community and getting feedback on the comp plan as a whole. So yep, so back to this discussion questions, or if you have any questions.
I'll start. So with the mitigation, does that take in consideration the traffic from Fort Lewis or from JBLM?
The emissions inventory?
Yeah.
No, JBLM emissions would not fall into our county emissions because it's not in our county.
Okay.
Yeah, and federal emissions are counted a little bit differently as well because we don't really have jurisdiction over them. So even if there's land within Thurston County, you know, when we're talking about emissions inventories, it's really things that the city can control, or I mean, even private facilities like businesses, but they operate within the city, so that we have some sort of ability to talk about their emissions. But yeah, but it would be included in a vehicle miles traveled study that we did. We have a lot of veterans and active military folks who live in Lacey that drive to JBLM. And so one of the policies you'll see in Reduce for Vehicle Miles Traveled is to just conduct a study to see where people are driving, how often they're driving, and how we can help reduce, really through probably public transportation projects, those vehicle miles that they're traveling. And that would take that into account.
Okay. That's kind of where, sorry, that's kind of what I meant was.
Okay, yeah.
Yeah.
Yeah, absolutely. Yep. Yeah, so we would consider where people are driving to work. And that would include if people are driving to King County, to Pierce County, or even south.
Okay, all right, thank you.
Yeah.
Yeah, so really liked a lot of what I heard. One of the thoughts that came to mind that I'm not sure if I heard mentioned is could we add more bus stops for on bus routes? For example, in areas like residential areas to increase the use of the buses that we already have. Because for example, Meridian campus, there are a couple of bus stops kind of towards the, entrance of that northeastern area, but there aren't very many throughout the community to make it very useful. I don't think it would increase the route time too much because it's, to me, very underused anyway. So I don't know, just an idea, more bus stops on the routes, existing routes.
Yeah, for sure. That's a great discussion as well, because intercity transit is currently doing, alongside the jurisdictions, an update, rethinking through how they do their routes. And so there's a possibility that they'll move sort of away from the model that they're currently using, to, where we have hubs and it can take a long time to get to Olympia or Lacey, even though we're fairly close together, to more of like a spine model where we could have maybe more stops or make faster stops or have different, transit lines, which is really what we need to make our cities and our county interconnected through transit. And so, working with intercity transit, leveraging those partnerships and just kind of supporting their work as well is like really important, because we don't control intercity transit, but, we have that partnership with them and their board as well. So.
I don't have a comment at this point. No.
You know, when I'm traveling to different places, a couple of things I'm seeing in other cities that I always think are amazing ideas. Looking at car parks that are just, absorbing heat in the summer and releasing it and contributing to those effects. And there's nothing really used in that space except for parking cars temporarily, but covering those spaces with solar panels might be a way that, I don't know if we could partner with other, I know their parking lots are putting in the EV charging stations. But it seems like maybe utilizing those already covered spaces to create a solar farm would be a great way to kind of offset our energy needs. Looking at, the new ferry they have that is the hydrogen fuel cell, like I don't even know if that's something that we can look towards, or if that's something that's being a realistic source of energy if we're removing dams to, exchange these energies and having these different ways where we can kind of reduce those, coal burning or whatever we're doing to spin a turbine. And again, preventing that sprawl, looking at cities where, there's a strong dense population, but it's brought into the city center instead of sprawling out. It always confuses me that we're kind of restricted to having a 3-story buildings when I look just down the way at Olympia, and I understand that, that costs a lot more money to go up higher and different things. But it does seem that when we're looking at a very limited amount of buildable land and we want to protect our trees, going up to build affordable condos is a great way to get people to get in the door to home ownership, to reduce those energy costs and to prevent sprawl. So
I have nothing to add.
I just have a clarifying question. When you talk about the bike lanes and the bike routes for offsetting car use, I understand bike lanes and the recreational aspect to it, but how practical is it, or what percentage do we estimate people would be taking a bicycle to and from work in the analysis?
Yeah, there might be something that speaks to that in the bicycle and pedestrian plan, which will need to be updated. And I think we have a policy within, if not, maybe something we should consider a policy for updating that plan. I mean, I bike to work. That may not be a shocker as a climate sustainability coordinator. There's like 3 months I don't bike to work just because it's so dark, and then coming down College when it's really dark can be really difficult on a bike. There is I know a lot of people bike to work in Seattle. But really it's sort of like if you build it, they will come situation is kind of how bicycle planning happens a lot. Is a lot of folks don't just feel comfortable with a white line on a road. Like that's not going to prevent a car from sort of sideswiping me or getting too close. So really it's all about building protected bike lanes. And I've heard a lot from the community that if there were more protected bike lanes, that they want to use their bike to get to the store, to get back, to get to work. And so yeah, I think it's one part of the solution, right? It's not the whole solution. Not everyone is going to bike to work. Some people are going to purchase an EV or use public transportation. Some people are going to bike, but it is one part of getting to our emissions reduction goals.
Thank you.
Yeah.
Elliot again. So you mentioned CCA is helping pay for some of this. It's the Climate Commitment Act by Washington, which is a cap and invest program that basically forced corporations to bid for their own high usage for their offsetting their own high usage. So they still have the same high usage, but they're basically paying a fine. Might as well call it a fine for this cap and invest program. And that money is in turn used to supplement some of these programs, such as the electric school buses, which are a huge failure in some areas that have cold climates, and they have about a 20% efficiency ratio. The money is also used for energy and more energy efficient appliances, but most of that money goes toward the bureaucracy of running those programs. I myself tried to use it for an apartment complex, and it wasn't cost efficient. So what other means of other than running on the corporate backs is there for this climate mitigation?
Yeah, and so just to clarify, cap and invest also means that over time they cap emissions lower and lower and lower to eventually that corporations either will have to pay such large fines it doesn't make sense for them to emit so much, or that they've reduced their emissions below the cap. And so it's not just that they get to keep emitting, they do cap those over time. It's not a perfect way to fund climate by any measures, and I'm not saying it is, but it is how our state has chosen to fund climate change and climate measures within the state. So that's what we have. We got HERE funding, which is through the Climate Commitment Act, and we got $477,000 from that. And only 50,000 of it is going to administrative costs. All the other, so around $418,000 of that is going straight to our community members. And some of them are going to have fully subsidized. At least 20 folks will have fully subsidized, which means they're out of pocket nothing to get a heat pump and to get energy efficiency into their home. So some of maybe the concerns around that have been addressed. We certainly use 95% of the grant funding that we get back to our community. The other things that we're looking at, we haven't really talked about. I mean, there's a lot of questions around how we're going to fund a lot of this. And I think that's something that we have to have a conversation about in the next 2 to 3 years. And I think we will have that conversation. And that's sort of why we have that policy, implement the Thurston Climate Mitigation Plan. Well, that's great, but how are we going to do that? So we're going to do that by looking at local funding sources and how we can leverage those, not just state dollars, and what that actually means. So if that's doing like a cost feasibility study or something to come up with those measures, then that's something that we'll have to do within the next 2 years.
Do you have anything, Robert?
No, I jumped the gun and talked about net zero last time, so you already heard.
All right. Thank you, Lindsay.
So yeah, just to wrap it up.
Thank you all.
Thanks everybody for joining us tonight. So what we'll do is we'll take this feedback, the feedback that our staff is providing at the same time as the council's providing, make the sausage and deliver that sausage to the community this summer in terms of our comp plan goals and policies. So really appreciate all your all feedback and yeah, more to come. But really good discussion. So thank you.
Hello. All right, we've got 12 minutes. Let's do this. My computer's also decided to not connect to the Wi-Fi, so might see if somebody else can bring up the slides. If possible, it's convenient timing. It's the bottom one. There it is.
Yeah.
I think that's the old one.
Yeah,
that is an old one. No, I think it's open and just.
Shared the wrong one, maybe. Yeah. So hit the zoom.
The one at the end there.
Stop share.
That one.
Yeah.
The similar opening slide.
Yep.
Paperweight.
Let's go there.
Yeah, all right. I'm Shepherd, senior planner here. Tonight, I'm gonna be talking about the rezone requests that we've collected over actually the last really 24 and 20 into 25. Yeah, and I'm gonna jump right into it, give a little bit of background and then run through the ones that we did receive and go from there. So yeah, our primary method of collection for these requests was actually through a survey this time. In years outside of the comprehensive plan update, it's typically more just conversation based over the planning counter. Applicants come in, they talk to us about what they're looking to do. And then we kind of walk them through the application process for docketing. And it goes through different rounds of review, and then ultimately either gets advanced as something that we're looking at or something that's not gonna be taken up that year. That said, this time around, it's a little bit different. We're doing kind of an accelerated version of that. Today, we're still kind of working through what would be considered the docketing phase, if you will. We rolled out last time we met on this topic, a kind of scoring rubric that we mocked up to help us in that kind of accelerated docketing process. And I think I actually have a slide on that in a little bit. But as far as submittals, we had 30 unique areas identified. We had more submittals but collectively, once we actually zeroed in on it, it might have been kind of for the same request or the same area. So we did some lumping together. We did some cleaning out of the ones that didn't really make sense as part of this conversation, but that did leave us with 30 unique areas identified. Traditionally, we get around 1 to 2 a year. So this is a lot more than what we normally work with. And those 1 to 2 a year typically take 6 to 9 months each. So consolidation and efficiency are the name of the game for this process. This is the rubric criteria that we generated that you guys looked at last time we were presenting on this topic. I'm not gonna spend too much time on this. It is attachment 1 in your packet, so it is available for additional review if you wanna refresher on what that's all about. But essentially we use this to run through those 30 rezone applications, really just to create 2 buckets. Ones that kind of rise to the top are more likely to get identified as ones that we could docket for 2025 and move forward as part of the comprehensive plan process. And then that secondary bucket would be ones that are recommended for 2026 or beyond, as far as just really capacity and recognizing that it's not only staff time, but it's planning commission meeting hours, which we're already almost at 8 o'clock here, through to the end of the year. And then also council as well, where even we were already talking with council about expanding their hours and adding additional meetings to fit it all in with our current workload. So before we were talking about kind of adding these to the list. So yeah. With that, really how we're using the scoring rubric. And this is, sorry, Lindsay, see if I can move you here. Again, attachment 1. We broke it out kind of a score of 0 through 5. 0 identifying kind of major issues or inconsistencies, depending on what the category was. So not allocating any points for that if it really flies in the face of critical areas or a comprehensive plan or other big issues. And then moving on down, a score of 1 was some concerns, but not critically problematic. So you get some points there, but not quite a 0. And then 2, we're getting into that middle range. So it meets most expectations with moderate concerns or limitations. So honestly, most rezone applications that we get probably fall into that category. And that's why that review process is so in-depth. We really do take the time to get into the granular details of each location, learn all about it, work it through the planning commission, work it through public hearings and outreach and engagement, and then up to the planning commission for that final decision. 3 aligns well with the criteria, few concerns or minor issues. 4 fully meets or exceeds expectations with no significant issues. And then we created a 5 category for priority criteria, and I'll get into what that is in a second, but really it's, let's actually see. Okay, yeah, so the 5 priority criteria was really predominantly city-owned property that might be under parks jurisdiction, is gonna be RAC phase 3, but is currently zoned residential or something like that. So, the priority criteria there is really shifting from some other use to open space institutional because it's transitioning to a civic use, it's transitioning to a park use. It's where fire stations currently exist, but it's zoned commercial or something along those lines. But that's really what that last scoring criteria was reserved for. So as far as final scoring interpretation, and we will get into the details of which each one of these are, but we had 14 locations that really, when you add all of these up and all the criteria that we're looking at, again, that's also in your packet. So if you want to look at the details there, that is available. But between that 35 and 40 point range, we had 14 locations that feel like they have a high probability of getting docketed this year, based on that point total. Moving into that 30 to 34 point range, these are ones that may require additional review and consideration. Could go either way, might make it as far as 2025, may also warrant enough review where 2026, where we can actually spend the time needed on those, makes more sense. So we had 8 that fall into that category. 25 to 29 points. This is really where we're getting to that zone where we think that there's enough review needed in this range that it really warrants a focused look at each site individually instead of kind of carrying it forward as part of the comprehensive outreach and engagement process. And then we have a few at the end, 3 locations that scored below 25 points. And we feel that need additional evaluation. And as a just kind of overarching statement, this is not necessarily a statement against these rezones at some point in time. It's just a recognition of our capacity to do the review to the depth that's needed in order to get to a point that we feel comfortable passing them forward or not. And that's a staff recognition. That's also having enough planning commission time to allocate to fully understand these sites, to make a recommendation one way or the other on your part. And then again, at the council level, having enough opportunity for them to understand these sites well enough to either make a decision yea or nay on them, which is how we would traditionally move forward with a comprehensive, or sorry, with a rezone request application outside of the comprehensive plan. Good so far?
Yep.
All right. So rezone locations for, so this first group here, that 35 to 40 point range, strong case for docketing in 2025. These locations 1 through 8 are all actually city owned property in some way or another. And really what you're seeing there is a current zoning shift from either residential or commercial uses to some form of open space institutional. And really that covers things like the police station, which is currently a CBD something. Moving it to open space institutional to kind of better match that use. It's already an existing use, but just the other valuable part here is that it gives us a better perception of how much land we have allocated to each type of use. So if it remained as say a commercial use, when we do those big totals at the end of the day, that actually is slightly misleading or misrepresentative of how much of that type of land capacity we actually have available to do different things. So a big part of this is actually just getting those totals closer to representative of what's actually happening on the ground today. The one caveat here is the Mullen Road property, which is currently a lot property, but we're engaged with them to actually turn that into a housing project. So that would be shifting from an open space institutional to actually a moderate density residential to better align with that project. Any questions on these ones? Yeah.
With this shift from high density and low density to open space, does that impact the numbers for, I mean, assuming this is all proper city of Lacey, that doesn't impact the unincorporated Lacey or the potential homes that we have to bring into the city, right? Or-
So Yeah, we did get a few requests that actually landed in the urban growth area, and I'll call those out in a little bit. These are all located within the city boundary as it's incorporated today. And it's really just getting our land use to better reflect the conditions on the ground and active uses that are taking place. So there's not really any like bias shifting from one to the other, short of the top one that we kind of talked about there. There's not gonna be any new uses that come of these shifting designations. These are just being updated to reflect what's currently happening today and give us a better number to look at when we're actually comparing, say, our commercial uses to our residential uses to our industrial ones. So just at the end of the day, when we have those big totals, that's actually closer to what's actually happening on the ground.
And I think also to get to, I think what you're asking about as well is that, you know, since these properties are all city owned already, they're already accounted for, and we're not counting them as like buildable lands for the purpose of housing capacity. So they're already taken off the list. The only one would be number one, which we're actually would be adding housing capacity to, because we're, you know, the sequence of events there is that, you know, it's owned currently by lot, but we'll own it for a short amount of time and then partner, I think, with the housing authority to do a project there. So the city is kind of almost just the, you know, facilitator at this point of delivering the property to the housing authority.
So like before us, we have a couple of rezoning. These properties that we're looking at, the rezoning are the direct result of the rezoning that we had to cover about a year ago where you took entire swaths and redid the map. Is this correct? Or, I mean, weren't those properties originally like commercial, residential?
Are you talking about the future land use maps that we've
Yes.
rented or provided for review? So that's a little bit different. So really, you know, what we're gonna be using this for, so, you know, we're going to get to a point of having a kind of a future land use map developed for your review. That's probably coming in the next meeting or two. We're gonna be using this as a guide as far as what the future land uses should be for these underlying properties. So we're not done with that process. It's just been conceptual at this point. What we're gonna be doing is developing this information, using this information to develop the final land use maps for your review that you're gonna see here in the next.
So like this property that we're looking at, open space 1, when was it redesignated? Because I know it wasn't originally open space 1.
Oh, the one that you got the letter for?
Yes.
Maybe we can get to that one in a little bit when we get to the one, because we'll go.
I'm just
we'll go
wondering
down-
how these properties went into these new transition designations and now we have to deal with them
Yeah, so
fighting those designations.
we'll get into that. It's
Are we
later
gonna
on the
be on
list.
steroids once we get into the land use that you just mentioned?
I'm not sure.
I don't know what to say that one. But yeah, we will get into that one a little bit, so we'll have an opportunity to talk about that one specifically. Do you have any questions about these ones here today?
No, I totally understood it. I think the reason I'm asking about that criteria is why don't we have that criteria in there of what the original designation was as part of that?
So the original.
That's what column 2 is, right?
Yeah, the current
Yeah,
zoning.
so current column, yes, I don't have the numbering across the
I'm
top.
talking about the rubric that you're for the rezone rubric.
Mhm.
That's what you're talking about, but there's no you're saying you know, we have a rezone is consistent with adjacent uses,
Mhm.
but we don't have what it originally was zoned for.
I think that's immaterial at that point, because if we trace it back 200 years, what does that change our current situation? If it's OSI and it needs to become low density residential, we're making that choice to move it over. Like, I don't think
Well, I think the debate is whether or not the property owner has a right to say, I would rather keep my designation.
well, that's one of the grading rubrics.
Yeah, it is, and for all of these that we're talking about, City of Lacey is the property owner.
On OS1, correct?
For the 1 through 8 that we're looking at right now.
Oh, well, I wasn't talking about those, I was talking about the rubric that you covered before and that you didn't ask questions on.
the last meeting that we looked at this subject was when we went through that rubric and asked a range of questions, then we actually updated the rubric to reflect those questions and topics that we were talking about.
Okay. Which I did by remote. I couldn't ask questions at the time. I see. Thank you.
Okay. Yeah, so that's 1 through 8. Moving into, still in that 35 to 40 point range of being identified as strong case for docketing in 2025. We have 9 through 14. So in total, we have 14 different destinations or locations, I should say, that fall into that really that 35 to 40 range based on the scoring criteria that we ran it through. And that criteria is based on kind of a simplified version of the full rezone process if we were doing this outside of a comprehensive plan cycle. So we kind of used the criteria that we would normally look at, simplified it way down, and did a quick review of all of these destinations just to help us in that sorting process of getting what we think we can carry forward as far as 2025 and what we think we can review in 2026 as part of a more in-depth analysis. So these ones here are not owned, and I'm going to move on out of the way. So this is getting into attachment 3 at this point. So this is that expanded attachment in your packet that actually lists all the properties, and it does show all of the scores that were allocated to each one of those based on the scoring criteria. And it does break that out. I will note that we have refined that a little bit as more information has actually come in even since you guys got that packet. So there were a few changes. For example, the one that I think you were referencing earlier, and the one that we got a couple presentations on, we actually updated that based on the owner's expressed interest in getting that rezone. But we'll get into that in a little bit. So these ones here still fall into that 35 to 40 point range. I'm going to go down the list on these because they are a little bit more nuanced. This is Hose Street here. It is currently a general commercial designation. That said, if you look at the strip of property, it's primarily a right-of-way. And then there's a sliver of property kind of at the northern end of it. But it has been since subdivided and developed all around it with that mixed use high density. The right-of-way, which it primarily is, was left out of that rezone when it took place. So from our perspective, we view this as more of a cleanup than actually a rezone because it is just an island out there. The next one here, and actually all of the ones that I've highlighted in yellow, the council expressed an interest in looking for opportunities to consolidate zones because we have so many of them. So the ones that we've highlighted in yellow are opportunities for consolidation. So by shifting what is currently designated into a different designation, we could theoretically remove that zoning from our list of 37 or 38 zone designations we have. So the ones that are in yellow are helping us move towards that ultimate goal, which is something that the council asked for. This location here is currently a village designation. That typically takes place in advance of development and then while things are being constructed, but post-construction it really ceases to have that village designation. And in this case, this area was built out as moderate density residential. So we would just be shifting it from the village designation to moderate density residential to reflect what has since been constructed there. There's no remaining undevelopable land, so it's not like by changing that designation, it's going to suddenly shift to something else. But that's why that one scored relatively well. 829 Lacey Street Southeast is part of what we call our historic neighborhood. Point on this is that our historic neighborhood is actually just a zoning designation, just like any other zoning designation. It's actually not reflective of a historically designated neighborhood. So that there is some confusion that has existed around that name. We have identified this as a potential opportunity for rezone potential. That said, with House Bill 1110, our low density, potentially our historic neighborhood and our moderate density are all essentially going to have the same density requirements in the very near term. So our thought process here, while it does score well, it'll be better to advance that through that process. So that wouldn't be one that we would necessarily look at as part of the rezoning process, but it is something that we want to keep track of, so it is here listed right now. The next one, number 12 here, this is actually just, again, similar to number 9. It's a sliver of mineral extraction that's tacked onto the end of Miles Sand and Gravel. It was forgotten somewhere in the shuffle. So bringing that in alignment with the rest of that property and what it's currently designated as CBD 6. All right, 4110 6th Avenue Northeast, mixed use moderate density. So this is another consolidation opportunity. We only have actually, I believe, 1 or 2 mixed use moderate density corridor designations within our city. Looking at the code for that, it actually was based on our neighborhood commercial district code when it was previously adopted. So before we went through our neighborhood commercial update, the mixed use moderate density corridor and our previous neighborhood commercial zone were essentially identical as far as code language and what was written in them. So there is an opportunity to shift that into primarily a neighborhood commercial designated zone, which would give us the opportunity to potentially eliminate that zone completely from our code, which is one of the things that council is taking a look at. That said, part of that is already developed as residential, so that might be the portion that's residential, we shift to a residential designation. The portion that was developed as commercial, we shift to that neighborhood commercial designation. This is really where they do technically score well, but there is more review that's going to be needed for these types of sites. So this might be one that's recommended for initially carrying forward as part of this process, but we might get to a point where there's so much review that's necessary for that site that it's recommended for maybe 2026, where we can really allocate the time needed to get to the answer that we all feel good about. And then the last one here, neighborhood commercial. Some of you are around for this. This site is actually currently storage units that was developed as part of it's not a village, but it was developed as part of a village center. At the time, it was in conflict with neighborhood commercial designation. It is still technically in conflict with the neighborhood commercial designation. That said, community commercial is one of our districts that currently does permit storage units. So this was a potential rezone just to reflect what's already currently built on the ground today. So there's not that conflict of use. Questions on these? Yeah.
So is there a way that we can get the property owner input on these designations, since we're taking their property and redesignating what they can do with their property?
Mm-hmm. So short of this one here, which has about, oh man. So this village center includes about 50 or so residential parcels. We would be reaching out to them as part of this, but it's not a simple single property owner that we would be getting their guidance from. So if this one does get carried forward as part of our 2025 docketing, the next phase in that review would be contacting those property owners that would undergo that rezone and getting their guidance on that. The historic neighborhood, we've already talked about that one. That would be advanced through a different tract. So we're not really looking at that through this process. Mineral extraction, mixed use moderate density, again, I was just talking about that one. There are multiple property owners in there. So if that were to hypothetically get carried forward as part of this process and we get into it and it proves more complicated than we have capacity for, that might be something that is then recommended for a greater review when we have more staff time to allocate towards that. And then the rest of these all have owner endorsements already on them. They do. Yep. So all the ones that are single property ownership have owner endorsements on them. The ones that have multiple would require some additional conversations with the targeted locations.
Thank you for addressing that.
Mm-hmm.
I believe in property rights.
I do too. Anything else on this? All right, now's where we get into the fun ones. So again, yellow is representative of those consolidation opportunities. Orange is part of kind of a 6 parcel grouping where we had one applicant come forward and request those. I think we actually had a presentation on it at the beginning of this evening, and I'll get into that in a second. But the top one here, so historic neighborhood, and for those of you, I'm just actually gonna, these are all hyperlinked. They're also hyperlinked in your packet, so if you want to do some additional reading at any point in time, that is available. You can cruise around Google Earth here as well.
Maybe too, Han, since we made some changes, just recently updated some of the numbers, maybe we can send out tomorrow this most recent version of this too, so y'all can use it to see and click on the individual properties and stuff like that too.
So this whole area, and I am being kind of general here, is what's generally considered our neighborhood commercial. It's directly east of St. Martin's.
Lacey Historic Neighborhood.
Yes. We have too many. So this is one that there is an opportunity for consolidation. There are other state level requirements that are essentially going to force us to treat this the same way as our moderate density residential designations anyways. So there are some opportunities there to consolidate, which is a council priority, to meet density requirements, which is a state priority. But again, probably better fit for the housing tract than the rezone tract as far as that one. That said, we did have a property owner right in here that is technically within the historic neighborhood that abuts against, I think this is CBD 4 or 5 right here, that has expressed an interest in going to CBD, and I'm blanking on if it's 4 or 5, but it's a commercial mixed use designation. Let's see if I can cleanly, I've lost it all now. All right, so that's what that one is there. So while the majority of our historic neighborhood, we do anticipate shifting either into a low density or moderate density residential in the future. This specific property owner who owns those 2 parcels has expressed an interest in actually going to a mixed use kind of commercial designation. It did score relatively well because it's on a primary corridor. It's abutting against that use that they're requesting already. And there's not many other site characteristics that would create challenges there that we can see at this time. So again, this is really just a docketing for this year or a future year. Hypothetically, if this were to get pushed to the docketing for this year, there is still a scenario that we would run into some challenges there that would push it to a future year because we just don't have that capacity. But again, that's kind of how we're thinking about all of these. Moving into the this one here, which is a low density residential. So this is actually getting into, this is part of a request that came from one of our property owners down here on 6335 Pacific Avenue. Right now they have a low density residential designation. I will actually hop into this one because it's going to cover all 3 of those orange ones. Apologies for the jumping back and forth. We have, so right here, actually this is where we just were a second ago looking at that. So moving down over here onto Pacific, again, we have that central business district, and I'm blanking on if it's 4 or 5, but it is kind of a mixed use commercial use. And then we have 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6 parcels in here that actually are low density residential island, if you will. And then we have Woodland Creek and the Woodland Park here, and then we have the Lake Lois Habitat Reserve. So it is this 6 parcel pocket of low density residential that's bounded to the east by open space institutional and to the west by a mixed use commercial designation. So we had one specific applicant come forward that requested a rezone to that commercial designation. 2 of those parcels are actually currently owned by the city. They are right along Pacific, so there is value there. Looking forward probably more as that mixed use commercial designation than a low density residential. And then at that point, it leaves 2 additional residential sites on the north side of Pacific, and then a daycare here, which would align with that mixed use commercial designation instead of that residential. Our thought on these, and given this is definitely up for discussion and different things could shake out as we move through this process, that it would make sense to move these as a group instead of individually, because then we would have progressively smaller and smaller islands of residential that may not match the surrounding uses. So while we do have one specific applicant, as a staff and kind of consistency with mapping approach, we would like to move these as a group together one way or the other. Whether or not that's part of this process or saved for the future, that's something we can talk about. And then also Ryan did reference our future land use map, which is more of a generalized map. So even potentially if these don't get moved forward as part of the rezone, maybe we update that future land use map to recognize that designation in the future, which would facilitate an easier transition to that moving forward. So a couple different options and avenues there as far as what we could do. Let's see if I can find this again. So that covered the orange ones. So these top two are currently under our ownership. And then this is the one that came forward and requested that rezone in the first place. So that's those.
Can you just remind me, I think we've talked about this, that if there ever was a designation, individuals aren't gonna be like uplifted and say you can no longer live here. It's when they go to sell, it's sold as a commercial, it's sold as a CBD 5 or something along those lines, so they can remain
Absolutely.
in their house. We're not like uprooting anyone, right? Okay.
Thank you for that comment.
It actually doesn't trigger anything even when you sell. So, you know, just to clarify, we do have certain, you know, threshold requirements that require land uses to transition to what the underlying zoning is, but that usually has to do with like a substantial remodel or something like that. It's not, there's no requirement for anybody once they sell or anything like that. That's, you know, if you had a house and you sold it to me and it was zoned commercial, I could still continue to live in that house, right?
But if you decided to do some absorbent remodel, the city might then say, actually, this is zoned for commercial, it needs to kind of stay in the.
Exactly. So then at some point, you know, you're doing a substantial enough remodel where the value of that is exceeding the value of it's allowed to continue kind of as is until you hit some certain thresholds, and that's when the trigger is. So, yeah.
Thank you.
Let's see, where are we here? Open space institutional, parkside, moderate density residential. Okay, yeah, so, and then this Parkside one is actually a religious surplus lot that is currently owned by a religious entity, but they've since decided that they don't want to move forward with any kind of use that would align with that. This one is actually, I think, if I can do this right, would be right to the north of this location here. So this village designation, based on the build out that's already taken place, would be most consistent with our moderate density residential designation. This one here, which is currently an open space institutional, is actually right next to one of our parks, but we've asked our park department if they have any interest in it, and they don't have capacity or interest in it moving forward. So based on what else is surrounding that site, the next best use would probably be some kind of moderate density residential designation. So what we see here is consolidation with residential village rezone, and the religious surplus lot is just a designation, so I can remember what I'm talking about. But that's what that one is there. We already talked about the orange, again, village to neighborhood commercial. Oh yeah, okay, so these blue ones were two locations that were identified, but they're currently in the urban growth area. So they wouldn't move forward as part of this process, but we can work with Thurston County to identify our priorities there moving forward. At such time when either they rezone or they update or are incorporated into the city. So I'm not gonna spend too much time on those, but those are out in the urban growth areas, so we want to keep track of those on our list, but not part of this process. And then we have, yep, so this one is Miles Sand and Gravel. We're currently in conversations with them. They have a light industrial commercial designation, which is north of I-5, directly west of where they're currently operating over there. As they kind of are progressively getting closer and closer to being done with their site as a gravel destination, mining operation. The majority and remainder of their site has this Hawkesbury business business district designation, so really this is a placeholder right now. Depending on further conversations with them to see where they want to go with it moving forward. But what we are recognizing is that light industrial commercial designation that it has for mining operations really probably isn't the best fit for an urban location moving forward. Again, we're kind of in that 30 to 34 range, so these a lot of these are probably going to be leaning towards could benefit from greater review. But they are on the list.
What about the property across from Miles?
Which one? We'll jump over there.
The,
Here, let's take this link. I'm gonna have like 100 tabs open by the end of this. So this is their current
asphalt.
operating location right here. We're talking about this area right now, which has a light industrial commercial designation.
I
But
thought
it
you were
is,
talking about Miles itself.
yeah, they own this over here.
Oh, they own both, okay.
Mhm. Yeah, so they own both sides of that road. We are in conversations with them. Really, that one's kind of a placeholder right now to recognize that we don't want it to remain kind of a industrial designation moving forward into the future. But we're working with them to figure out what the best use is for their goals.
Why not? There's an industrial park in there, isn't there?
So the industrial park is primarily based on the mining operation. So whenever that mining operation concludes, we're looking forward beyond that to the next use that that destination might have.
You have Ziegler's, you have a core drilling, you have a pump company.
Mhm.
They would probably want to remain in there, wouldn't they?
There's a range of different designations that would accommodate those uses as well, not only just that industrial.
Okay.
We'll be having conversations with each property owner before any changes take place.
Good, thank you.
Yep. Let's see here. And I think that gets to the end of this list. Are there any other, I know we've had some already, questions on these properties right now? Nope. All right, we're actually moving through this a little bit faster than I thought we would, so I'm gonna actually get out of here in a slightly reasonable time. I don't know that I should have said that out loud.
That's, then you jinx us.
Yeah, sorry about that. So this last list, 23 through 30, kind of really rounding it out here. They fall somewhere in that really 29 or below range. And again, the distinction that we're trying to make here is ones that warrant additional review, ones that are very minimal in the amount of review that we anticipate, and we think that we can move forward quickly as part of the comprehensive plan 2025. So those are the two buckets that we're trying to draw here. That's not a statement against any of the viability of any of these sites. It's just really a recognition of our capacity to review them in a meaningful way.
Yeah.
So top one, that's an orange, which is looking at, oh yeah, so that was one of the last, that was the daycare that I referenced earlier. That was part of that 6 parcel consolidation that we'd like to move as a group instead of individually piecemeal. Just so that's what that is there. Separately, they score kind of at different levels throughout this. Collectively, that could potentially shift if we were looking at them as a whole versus individually. But that's what that one is there. This is, yep, so this is the CB or open space institutional, and I will jump to this one. This is the one that we actually had, I believe, 3 presentations on today at the beginning of our meeting. So this is the site right here in question. It does have commercial along the northern boundary line. That said, we have low density residential on the other 3 sides of this property. And then also access is either, so there's the owners of this site also own this site right here. So access to this site, I believe it's currently being used as kind of a parking lot for the customers of this destination. But if we were looking at this as a separate site to be developed, access would either be through an existing commercial or through a residential neighborhood. And really, the reason that this scored where it did based on our initial criteria, one had to do with access. It's either through another property or through a residential neighborhood. which could create some conflicts there. And then also as far as adjacent uses, if this were to get rezoned to match the existing CBD designation up here, it could develop into a wide range of things, including a very large commercial site. So for those reasons, primarily, we deem this one that would probably benefit from additional review.
Yeah, I'll give a little bit of extra context on this. I've known about this site for 20 years and the kind of the history and issues that have gone along with it. So, because the reason is because we were made aware that it was a violation. So it was previously Ricardo's restaurant before Ricardo's moved to Midtown to the hub. And they basically took down the fence, moved in the gravel and started parking cars there. And so we got word from the neighbors. They were obviously concerned that the restaurant was parking their cars there. And so we looked into it. This is a piece of property that the reason it's zoned open space institutional is because it is an old subdivision, a subdivision that predates Lacey. It was actually done in Thurston County prior to incorporation of Lacey. It was designated as the playground tract for the neighborhood. There are no covenants that we can find or restrictions on the face of the plat or anything like that that says that it has to be used for a playground forever. It needs to comply with the zoning regulations and, those kinds of things, but there's nothing that says that they need to have playground equipment there, for example, right? It is just zoned or just designated as the playground tract in the legal description. And so, I think they're trying to resolve a potential old violation. And, in doing that, I think they need to kind of clean up the zoning to be able to do anything other than essentially what's allowed under OSI, which would be like a playground or a police station or something like that. Because it allows for a variety of different kind of like open space related uses as well as institutional uses. So therefore, that's why it's called open space institutional. So, so we've been talking to neighbors out there for a long time now that have concerns, and they certainly have concerns over the future development of that site as well, because, no matter what's done there, the access is going to be through that single family neighborhood. So if you can bring up that aerial again, Hans. So, this connects obviously to Lacey Boulevard to the north, which, you heard from, the applicant's representative that has, frequent transit along that corridor. And I think everybody's familiar with the Lacey Boulevard, Pacific Avenue corridor and how easy it is to get through there, which makes a lot of sense from the north end. But if you look south of there, it's nothing but a single family subdivision. And I've lived here my whole life and I get lost in the middle of that. There's so many houses. And so, the concern I think from our end would be that, this would take, number one, more staff time to be able to process, because, we'd have to kind of look at what's the highest and best use of that property, what's the intent of the property owner, what do they want to get out of it? I could see that in my mind, residential is really going to be, and probably something like single family residential is something that's going to be palatable to the neighbors.
Isn't that what they all said tonight, or did I mishear them? I thought they verbally said they wanted to do low density residential, but there it says commercial business district. So
Yeah.
did I mishear them tonight?
I'm not clear.
Yeah, so what was submitted through the request mapping application that we had was for a commercial
Gotcha.
central business district designation. It wasn't a request for residential. That said, residential isn't allowed use in that designation, but it would be more akin to a high density residential than a lower density residential. And would probably still require some type of commercial element to it.
So I think that, this may be something that could be more palatable, maybe score higher, because it's gonna be, it's something that we maybe could look at wrapping in if, the property owner was amenable to doing like a single family proposal there, right? So then it's consistent with the neighborhood, and it seems to me like, well, that's almost like a cleanup issue, right? But if it's gonna be something that is more along the lines of the central business district zone, where, you could have, a standalone commercial use, you could have a daycare there, you could have, an office building there, you could have, that brings up other issues that just at a high level through a comp plan update, we're just not able to easily tackle. And that'd be something that we'd actually require like a, standalone comp plan amendment rezone type application for. So I think we're having conversations with the property owner and their representative is that maybe, we can have some additional conversations with them and say like, look, this may be something that we could, elevate if we were able to get something that's a little bit more consistent with the neighborhood. If it's something that, if they really want to stand firm and they really want something that's gonna be more commercial in nature, that's gonna be something that we just don't have the capacity to be able to do at this point. And having that be kind of the thing that may push them ahead, as kind of a cleanup issue, which those are the things that if you look back at the first slide, those are the things that are really scoring the highest. Are those things that are kind of like, oh, we can just, take care of them. They're a little bit, I don't wanna say it, but they're a little bit kind of no-brainer kind of things versus stuff like this as scoring lower because of the potential, neighborhood issues and those
Yeah.
kinds of things that would take a significant amount of time to kind of figure all that stuff out.
Just to be clear, I know there's obviously a newer restaurant after Ricardo's left, like when they purchased this, it's not like we like switched it to OSI, right? Like they purchased it knowing that it was OSI, that particular sublot. Okay,
Yeah,
just
this
making-
has been open space institutional. I mean, I conservatively can say since the early nineties.
Yeah, well, and it says, 1955 with the recorded and in the letter, Spencer, just for point of clarification, they're preferred as CBD for even in their letter that they sent to us, so. Oh, sorry, it looked like it was on. You're fooling me.
I've been reading on my phone the whole.
Okay, that makes sense. It makes me feel a little better that like they purchased it with that designation, not like, if it was a clerical error on our end, I would be more apt to say like.
We did previously call out some that arguably would fall into the clerical error category. This one, I think they've actually done more research so far on this than we have, but it sounds like since 1955, which well predates the current ownership. So it's not a surprise, its current designation, characterizing it as a mistake. I mean, its original intent was for a playground, so that might not be on the plat, but I think we have some differing views on clerical errors and the result of that. One thing I will note though, in your packet that went out, this did have, I think, like a 22 or 23 designation on it. We did add additional 5 points since having conversations with the ownership and getting that verbal request that is in fact something that the ownership is interested in. So here is shown as a 28. But still there are those other concerns that we had that we've identified that warrant this for greater review than what we have capacity for.
So we currently don't have an actual plan of what is to be put in there. They're basically just asking for zoning.
Correct.
Right.
So that makes it even harder for us because.
Yeah, so maybe, I mean, I guess at some point, and I don't know if it's tonight or at a future meeting, we just kind of need general agreement from the planning commission that yes, we're on the right track as far as these go. And maybe just some direction on this one as far as what the planning commission would recommend in terms of our path forward to give us kind of some input. I mean, is it, based on what you've learned tonight, is it worth, us going back to the applicant and having some more discussions about, hey, what truly is, if, would you be amenable to doing residential? It isn't a residential subdivision. That subdivision does not have sidewalks. It does not, that this is really kind of the main access to that, right? Versus the back part of a restaurant's parking lot.
Pretty established.
And it's pretty clear they're interested in changing it, so it's not like there's a lack of interest on their part, which like some of these I know people like sent in for other people, right? Like this is them.
We do have some that we've changed the scores in a negative direction because.
Because you found out.
Because
In fact, we've asked them to participate in this process because we are aware that this issue occurs. And so we've said, hey, hold on, because we think we have a way to be able to address this. And so, I think part of it is we just want to make sure that when we're addressing it, that we're doing it so that it's compatible with the neighborhood, that we're taking all those things into consideration and not just, oh, what's the property owners, what do they want to do?
Right,
I'm sorry, Carrie.
I don't know if I misheard you. Did you say that if even with the OSI, it could be like a single residence or a low density or did you say that that's something that would be a possible change that would be more amenable to the existing neighborhood?
Yeah, so with the existing open space institutional, that really only allows for institutional uses that are like quasi-government related. So it could be like a police station or a museum or a library or something like that. But then also it could be open space, right? So like a playground or something like that. That's really what that open space institutional designation is.
And the restaurant is a separate entity or a separate lot from what being
Correct,
resounds.
and zoned differently.
I actually my first house was on Dogwood, which is right around the corner. So I'm very intimate with the lot. I also built in that neighborhood. Those are 1960s homes, 1,000 square foot, 1,200 square foot, et cetera. Max was like 1,600 split. So the cost effectiveness of building a home on that is non-existent. The comps just won't work out. So about the only thing that would work on that, other than a commercial, is an apartment, or which there are apartments in that neighborhood, fourplexes, et cetera, by the Lacey Post Office. And then there's duplexes within the neighborhood.
Yeah, so we
So
do
the
allow.
dupes and the fourplexes will work for the lot comp wise, but as far as commercial, you would have a huge argument with the neighborhood. It would be another Meridian campus. I guarantee it.
About how big is the property? Is it half an acre?
Oh, man, now you're asking questions.
Sorry. But yeah, it's large enough in my mind to be able to subdivide. I guess that's what I'm seeing. And if it was zone residential, we do allow duplexes and triplexes in low density zones on individual lots. And so somebody could take it and divide it into, a couple, 2-3 lots and put duplexes or triplexes on them.
About multi-village concept with it.
What's that?
Would a village concept be able to fit?
Like a village, like
like what's on Golf Club Road there?
yeah, that would work as well. So cottage home.
Cottage,
Yeah.
which is low income feasibility and available for loans.
You doing math ons?
Nope. Not too late.
5?
You're too late in the evening for that. Really done it now.
We won't worry about the size, but I guess any other feedback that you guys have?
I agree we should rezone, but as far as commercial, I think that's a huge road to.
Right.
Oh.
Yeah, that's probably just so inconsistent with what's around it.
Right, but it's worth looking at rezoning, because the reality is if we don't rezone it and it just stays this, then we run into the issue of like what happened, which is it turns into a parking lot and people are upset,
Yeah.
right?
Then I had one other question.
Yeah.
Gemini looks like it actually extends through there, but that's just a gravel road.
Yeah, that's just Google overlaying.
That's no
something.
easement or anything like that.
No, that's just.
It's just one
There's
big
streets trying to guess where roads might, I don't know.
Okay.
Nope, that is just a rectangular-ish parcel of an unknown size. But yeah, moving on to the next one, this is currently a cemetery designation. The primary reason that it scored so low in our very quick rubric is because it's right next to this rather large wetland complex with some buffers that extend onto it. So again, going back to kind of our original statement, this isn't necessarily staff saying that these aren't great candidates for rezones. It's just that they warrant additional review that we don't have capacity to do right now. So based on the environmental considerations of this site, this is probably something that we would recommend for a future cycle.
Are they OSI down?
They're actually a cemetery designation, so we do have.
It's not a current cemetery.
It's not a current cemetery.
Just where the bodies are buried.
I have not personally done any investigation out there. I can't confirm or deny that, but.
It's the old boys network.
Yeah, but it probably deserves some additional investigation, site assessment that we just really don't have capacity for. this year. Neighbor commercial designation, so this one, you guys might, those of you that experienced our update to our neighbor commercial district might be familiar with this site here. So this is an older aerial. It's actually talking about this parcel here and this one here. In this case, this road outline that you see is actually reflective of what's on the ground. There are no trees here anymore. Really everything out here, this whole area has been developed into Tilden Apartments. Historically, this whole site was a community commercial designation. And we actually worked with the owners of Tilden Apartments to redesignate it to a use that accommodated higher density residential than what the community commercial designation would have accommodated at the time. So that already was part of a rezone designation to allow that use to take place at that location. Part of that agreement was that we would reserve those two corner lots off of 31st and on the corner of Willamette Drive there to recapture some of that lost community commercial designation that was given up to allow for those apartments to go through. The request is now to rezone those last two lots from that commercial designation to a residential one to probably build more of what's currently out there. There's been some pretty heightened community attention in this area as far as those uses go. So again, recommendation there is really that warrants additional attention than we have capacity to give at this time. Where are we? Open space, institutional, adjust to align parcel boundaries.
This is the one in Thurston County.
Okay, cool. It's like, I don't know where this is. Yeah, there's that blue designation. So this was a request that came in. It's in Thurston County in our urban growth area. We'll have continued conversations with Thurston County about it, but not carried forward as part of this process. Hawkesbury Business District into a light industrial commercial designation. So there are actually two parcels here that both came in at the same time. We have been in pretty consistent conversations with the owners of these sites. I will bring them up. All right. So the two sites in question is this rectangle here that this dot is in the middle of. So that one there, and then actually this one here. They both scored pretty similarly. Given for some different reasons. This one, based on its prominence along Marvin Road, historically, we haven't really viewed that as a great candidate for additional industrial. But in any event, it probably deserves more attention than what we have capacity to really do that site analysis and figure out what the best use is for it. On this side, again, it's currently a Hawkesbury Business District. For those to kind of get oriented, this is Cabela's down here. This is the big new area that's designated Wayman's Village, which is actually the vast majority of our Hawkesbury Business District is actually made up in this area. As that village gets developed, we're actually going to lose essentially the mass majority of our land that's designated Hawkesbury Business District. The remainder really being kind of these parcels in here, which will then abut that development. So it's kind of the component of that the city is still gonna have some sway in moving forward. It's also directly next to a residential development here. So moving from what would be kind of a commercial mixed use to an industrial one next to residential, in our view, probably warrants additional review than we have capacity for. So. And then the final one, ooh, man. Is 8403 Martin Way. This property is actually currently owned by Department of Natural Resources. We can hop to it just for fun. It's this forested. Oh man, no, I don't want to do that. Go ahead, switch. We have city policies against using you. Yeah, so it's this big rectangle here. for reference, right across the way, this is Costco, this is Home Depot, so people can get oriented, this is by the way.
I know that.
So that's that. It does have some signage, I think, for future road access or something out here, when you're driving by, but, let's see if I can get back to it now. It is currently designated general commercial. The request is for mixed use, high density. Looking at the site, I think there's probably a blend of the two of them make a lot of sense based on how deep that property is, but based on the scale and what's immediately around it, it's probably again, something that warrants additional review. That we would like to spend more time with than we can allocate as part of this update.
Yeah.
Because that's next to the apartment complexes, right?
Yeah, so the southern end of it does have some adjacency to residential uses.
Yeah.
Given the northern end is along Martin Way and has a lot more high activity there. And it might make sense more under its current designation. So some blend or splitting of the two probably makes sense. Again, this is not a statement that the city is not in favor of this, but just that
It's a
it's
single
probably.
it's a single piece of
It's a
property.
single
at the moment.
parcel. It's currently owned by
DNR.
DNR.
Yeah.
But just like DNR no longer has an interest in it for its previously intended use. But just looking forward, figuring out what the right blend is there for how big it is. And the number of trees that are on it and probably attention that it would get if we were to try to rezone it. It would, even if we did carry it forward, it would likely raise the attention around it to the point where we would want to spend more time on it than we'd be
The
able to allocate.
Marvin Road end of it is not heavily treated, but internally it is.
So really, it's all about just getting it right. And I don't know that we have time to get it right in the process that we have in front of us today. And then this is really just a summary slide. So we looked at this top section in the very beginning. Really a breakdown of how many different locations or parcels fall under each one of these scoring groups, if you will, based on our criteria that we developed. And really today or in the near term, what our goal is, I've probably said this 100 times at this point, but is to divide these locations into ones that we will docket for 2025, not necessarily approve, but just spend more time looking at as part of our 2025 update. And ones that we're just recognizing that we have limited capacity, we want to spend more time on them to give them the review that they probably deserve in a future update cycle. So that's kind of a summary of everything we ran through today. I do believe it's my last slide. So if you have any questions, any thoughts on where we should start with that split, we'd love to hear from you.
I'll go first. I think that we can not necessarily give a pass, but I think 35 and above, to use the phrase no brainer that's been thrown around. They meet the uses. We've talked about it. We've established these criteria. They fit the city's intent. They fit the property developer's intent. Those should be on the docket without question in my mind. And I think everything else, considering what we have on the table, should be pushed to a next year. Just because it's gonna require a deep dive, it's gonna require community engagement, it's gonna require processes that are gonna take a lot of time that just isn't reasonable.
Yeah.
Any other thoughts?
Yeah, I think it just depends on how much the no-brainers take as far as like, is that a really good work week, Hans, or is that like a really good work quarter, right? And so, I mean, I think some of it depends on how much of it is really like a clerical, where like maybe that 30 to 34 point group can get looked at, but I don't want you to like overcommit. And I think regardless of where they scored, giving them that opportunity of like, right, just because you applied and we can't get to it, we're gonna drop you like a hot potato. No, we are gonna circle back, but it is gonna be priority ordered or something along those lines, I think could go a long way. Because I know as someone who's applied to random things over the course of my life and then just never heard back or got a standard kind of rejection, doesn't always feel great. So giving them that next step.
And I will say that we are maintaining this in the entirety of this list for that specific reason.
Yeah.
This isn't a testament to say that they're not worth review. It's, we're maintaining it even when they're in the county, just because they are conversations worth having. It's just recognizing what conversations we can have this year.
My input would be just to let the building department, you guys tell us what the priorities are, because you have the pulse. You have your hand on the pulse of what we need to have in the near future.
Yeah, I mean, to echo kind of what's been said, I think starting with at least one bucket and, you know, we did a very quick review of these in order to kind of assign some level of prioritization to them. The more time we spend on any of these, the more we'll learn about them, but we're not really gonna be able to do that until we start digging into it. So it is kind of an unknown at this point, so, looking at previous years, we typically do about 1 to 2, so I think the 14 is already probably a big number. But we aren't gonna realistically know that until we really kind of sit down with each one and spend extended time to kind of get into it. I think that we can probably blur that cutoff as we get farther into it and just really kind of recognizing again that this is what we just have capacity for.
Question. Is there another list somewhere, or are you guys still thinking about that parcel across from the Meridian Neighborhood Park that was being considered for a gas station market? Like, is that just done? Okay, cool. Okay.
Yeah, that one is, you know, has an approved land use application on it. It is zoned neighborhood commercial. It's not up for discussion at this point.
Okay, so it's just whatever the owner is gonna develop it as.
Correct. So they've got.
The owner didn't reach out requesting any type of rezone as part of this process for that site.
Cool. Thanks.
Are the 7 rezones for the city to open space, is that a lot of work to do, or are those ones just kind of like quick and easy and then, so you're really only looking at top,
Yeah.
you're only looking at like 7 and maybe possibly 1 or.
So I think what we can do, I really appreciate the direction you've given to us tonight because it will help us, you know, kind of formulate a final list. So this is gonna be kind of formulated into, okay, you know, what are those things that are just really just a map change because the city owns the property and like, you know, we will just do it, right? Versus what are those that we need to involve, you know, the neighbors and, you know, the property owners in, which will, you know, amp up the level of, you know, effort on our part, come up with a good solid list, and then we can, you know, bring that to you probably at your next meeting. And then also too, we'll use that as the basis to develop that future land use map. Because the other thing is we need to kind of solidify what that future land use map is gonna look like. And having this list of rezones will kind of help us back into what a future land use map should be. Because we need to use that preferred alternative for the land use map for things like our transportation analysis. So we got a lot of stuff to do, right? And so we'll, I think, come back at the next meeting and have probably a solid list of those things and then how they're reflected in the future land use map for you to review.
Hopefully all the city-owned ones will go well.
I know some people.
You never know what's gonna trigger somebody's interest though, so, you know, I mean, part of this is, you know.
But it leaves you with a sort of a manageable number to deal with outside the city ones. I hope at 35.
That's our current hope
Yeah.
and belief based on the level of review that we have been able to do.
I mean, we, you know, having said that, I mean, even the Mullen Road property, right, which is, you know, the law
That's a
property.
negotiation.
Yeah, we've gotten neighborhood concerns from people that don't wanna see that turned into residential, right?
Yeah.
So, you know, even for the number one on the list is still, you know, gonna.
Involve some doing.
Yep.
Yeah, so. We just wanna be mindful of that as we book out the rest of our.
You weren't planning vacations anytime soon. It's summertime. You
Looking
guys
like
stay.
2027.
Job security.
Stay home.
But yeah, any other thoughts, comments, questions at this time about that list? I think we haven't quite hit 9 yet, so.
Makes sense.
So we'll email out that presentation
Yeah.
tomorrow. If you do have any feedback, feel free to email myself or Hans and, you know, I know it's late, so yeah, you think about it and let us know in the morning.
It's really helpful that these are all hyperlinked and you can actually look at.
I
the
appreciate
slide.
that.
Yeah. It's really good.
If not, I would have had to have Google Maps up.
Yeah, Google Maps. Drive around it. Or-
Okay, well, meeting adjourned, and we'll see everybody in 2 weeks.
Thank you. Thank you.
Okay.
Out of curiosity, that, speeding
Cons. My brain's broken. I don't wanna talk about this right now. But I was just, yeah, in elementary school.
What I heard, okay. And then